Chapter 980. In particular, he had shot Tang Menjing with his own hands. This was the biggest stone in the old man's heart. There was almost no one left in the Tang family. Although this generation of the Tang family was not on good terms with the Li family, Captain Li had always been a man of his word. He had promised the Tang brothers that he would protect the Tang family, but in the end, when they arrived at the hospital, the whole family had changed their faces, and their faces were full of joy for the festival. Compared to before, the old man had aged a lot. His hair, which was originally gray, was almost completely white, and the wrinkles on his face had deepened and lengthened. His aged face looked even more benevolent than before. Captain Li knew his situation. He looked at his grandchildren and great-grandchildren happily, and his face was full of satisfaction. Li Jianyue, Li Jianqian, and Li Mosin were all in the ward, eating glutinous rice balls with small spoons, talking in childish voices, and laughing, full of energy. Li Beixing, Li Xiqing, and Li Jinan were all there, as well as the Li Xiao and Li Xing families. They all celebrated the festival with Captain Li Sun. Although the venue was in the hospital, the winter solstice was still very lively. Captain Li's smile grew wider. He waved at Li Jinan and Li Beixing and shouted, "Jinan, Beixing, come here." Li Jinan sat next to Captain Li. Captain Li reached out and put his hand on Li Jinan's shoulder. He turned his head, looked at Li Beixing, and said, "You are all good children. Even when you are busy, remember to find a wife. I am dying. If I can see you bring a wife back to see me before I die, I will be satisfied even if I die." "Grandpa, don't say that." Li Jinan's heart ached. He took the old and withered hand of Captain Li. "Get better soon. I am waiting for you to arrange a wife for me." Li Beixing nodded in agreement and said, "Me too. Look, the wife you got for my second son is so good. Sister-in-law is simply the best woman I've ever seen. When you get better, remember to introduce me to one as well. I want to be even more blessed than my second son." Li Beixing nodded in agreement. Li Xiqing and Su Qianxi looked ahead and did not speak. Captain Li said with a smile, "I know my own body. You don't have to coax me. Finding a wife is the most important thing." Hearing such a topic, Li Mosin jumped out of the chair and said, "Grandpa, I will also find a wife in the future. When I have children, I will ask Grandpa to name my son and daughter." Everyone heard this and couldn't help laughing. Li Jianqian also ran down and said, "Yes, I heard that my name and Ursu's name were both given by great-grandfather." The children all said that it was very nice. The old man waved at them with a smile and said, "Good, good, good. Then you have to grow up quickly and find a wife. When the time comes, great-grandfather will give your children names, okay?" Li Jianyue held the small bowl and skipped over. In a soft voice, she shouted, "Great-grandpa, I want one too." The few children surrounded him and spoke one after another. The old man happily responded to them one by one, but it made the eyes of the people behind him turn red. Su Qianxi's heart ached. Holding his arm, her eyes became red. Chapter 981. The old man's mental state was not very good, and he soon became sleepy. After lying down, Li Xiao and his wife first sent all the children back, while Li Xiqing and his brothers continued to stay in the hospital to accompany the old man. Li Jinan was accompanying his grandfather in the hospital. Suddenly, his cell phone rang, and he immediately turned to look. But when he saw that it was a call from the company, he was a little disappointed. After solving the company's affairs, Li Jinan dialed the phone number again. This time, Yi Yuyu still didn't answer the phone. The phone was placed in the room, and it was muted. Yi Yuyu helped to cook outside, listening to the conversation between old Mrs. Shen and other family members outside. From the small things at home to those fun things, they didn't mention her at all. Yi Yu was a little disappointed. After helping the nanny to prepare the dishes, she took them out and shouted, "Mom, Dad, Grandma, Uncle, Aunt, and Brother Luo, and it's time to eat." After that, she turned around and went back to the kitchen to put the dumplings into the pot one by one. When the family was at the table, Mrs. Shen coughed softly and said, "Is there one person missing?" Shenjilia looked at the crowd, and finally moved Shen Luo in and said, "Brother, sister-in-law hasn't come yet." Shen Luo and seemed to suddenly understand and shouted, "Yu, let's eat." When Yu heard this shout, she was immediately overjoyed. She turned her head and answered, "Yes. I'm coming." However, she didn't dare to go just like that. After Yu cooked the dumplings, she scooped them up, put them on the table, and sat down next to Shen Luo. After all the dumplings were divided and placed in front of each of them, Yu began to eat with chopsticks. Old Mrs. Shen didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. She picked up the chopsticks and began to eat. Mrs. Shen looked at Yu and said, "Yu, don't work too hard. Remember to take care of your body so that you can have a good baby. If you can, it's better for you to quit your job and be a full-time wife at home. Luo is busy with work, so you can help him." A smile appeared on Yuyu's face. Just as she was about to speak, she heard Shen Luo say, "What's the rush?" While eating the dumplings, Shen Luo said, "If she wants to have a child, she can do so at any time. She's still so young. Let her work hard. Otherwise, she won't be able to go out to work after giving birth." The smile on Yuyu's face froze. With a dry laugh, she replied, "Yeah, I think so too." Mrs. Shen looked at Shen Luo reproachfully and said, "Yu is young, but you're already 28 years old. Look at the children of your age. Which one of them isn't married and has children? You're the eldest brother. You should set an example for Jilia." When Shenjilia heard that, he lowered his head and ate his food in silence. He didn't say anything in case he became the target of a mob. Suddenly, he saw a piece of chicken wing. He stretched out his chopsticks and picked it up for Shenmanting, who had been sitting quietly at the side. He said, "Eat more." Shenmanting was stunned. She noticed that Yu was looking at her. She lowered her head guiltily and said, "Thank you, brother." Shen Luo didn't care and continued to eat. Chapter 982. When old Mrs. Shen saw this, she snorted with dissatisfaction and said, "Some people don't eat if they don't want to eat. They eat slowly and are in a daze. How much do they not want to go back to this family?" Yuyu's expression changed and she said, "Grandma, did I say it was you?" Old Mrs. Shen laughed and said, "Why do you have to take it personally? You're being too honest." Yu didn't say anything and continued to eat. In this family, she shouldn't talk too much. The more she said, the more mistakes she would make. After dinner, Yu sat aside and waited for the family to finish eating so that she could help clean up the dishes. However, when Yu was ready to do it, her hand was held. Shen Luo stood aside and took her hand. He squinted and said lazily, "We don't lack a nanny in our family. Just do your job well. Brother Luo, don't call me that. I'm your husband." Shen Luo's voice was not low, and the dining room was close to the living room, so the people in the living room could hear it clearly. Shenmanting and Shenjilia were happy to hear it. One was happy that Shen Luo was likely to fall in love with Yu, and the other was happy that Yu had finally made it. However, old Mrs. Shen was not so happy. She sat on the sofa and said, "What's so good about this woman? She looks so attractive. She's not a member of our family. She's destined to be separated. It's better not to agree to marry her in the first place. She's a fickle woman. It's also the fate of a second marriage. What a sin. At such a distance, old Mrs. Shen's words could easily be heard by Yi Yu. Mrs. Shen felt that something was wrong and said, "Mom, Yu is listening." Old Mrs. Shen said confidently, "So what? I'm not afraid of her. As for you, I didn't agree to marry this woman, but you insisted. You framed Shen Luo, and because he is not your son, right?" Mrs. Shen was even more embarrassed and speechless for a while. She only gave birth to Shen Jilia, and Shen Luo, Anne's mother, had already gone crazy after giving birth to Shen Luo, and when she was pregnant with the second child, she was lost outside, and Shen Manting was called back later. Mrs. Shen was considered a descendant of a prestigious family. It was not very honorable to be a concubine for someone else. Now that old Mrs. Shen had brought it up, she felt a little awkward. Shen Manting and Shen Jilia looked at each other and didn't respond. When Yi Yu heard the conversation from afar, she began to take notice of it. In this family, Mama Shen was the person who treated her the best, but because of her, old Madam Shen had said such things. Everyone said that she might not be very smart, but sometimes the words that the old lady said were so accurate and direct. Was such an old lady really not smart? Yi Yu had her suspicions, but she was secretly delighted to be pulled along by him. Shen Luo and pulled her into the room and said, "Stay here. Don't take Grandma's words to heart." Was he concerned about her? Yi Yu felt a sweetness in her heart. She nodded her head and replied, "Okay." The corners of Shen Luo Anne's mouth twitched when he saw her expression. He let go of her hand and walked out. Chapter 983. What? Shen Luo and turned his head and looked at her. You changed your mind quickly. Being teased, Yi Yu blushed a little and said, "What are you going to do?" "Sleep in the study." Shen Luo Anne's face didn't change, as if he was talking about something normal. Yi Yu's hand holding Shen Luo Anne's sleeve slightly tightened and said, "Aren't we husband and wife? Husband and wife should sleep in the same room." Shen Luo Anne smiled and said, "Yes, but I don't want to." Yi Yu felt even more uncomfortable. She lowered her head and said, "Mom also wants us to be together. She is not my mother, nor is she your mother. Why do you listen to her so much?" Shen Luo and took her hand away and said, "Do you wag your tail at someone who is nice to you? Is he scolding me?" Yi Yu raised her eyes and looked at Shen Luo and Shen Luo and smiled gently and said, "I'm kidding. Don't be too sensitive. Go to bed early." After saying that, Shen Luo and went out. Yi Yu was left alone in the room, standing in the same place. The sentence sounded in her mind, "I have married you. What else do you want?" Really, in addition to the identity of Mrs. Shen, I can't get anything else. Yi Yu stood in the same place and looked at the front where Shen Luo and left with her eyes down. How sad. Shen Manting accompanied the old lady to watch TV in the living room and then returned to the room. However, as soon as she turned on the light, she saw a dark shadow lying on her bed. Shen Manting was scared. After seeing that it was Shen Luo, she didn't relax at all, and the panic in her heart was even worse. Subconsciously, Shen Manting turned around and turned to open the door to go out. However, before she opened the door, she had been dragged by Shen Luo and thrown onto the bed. Shen Manting wanted to scream, but her mouth was covered. Shen Luo Anne's face was a little gloomy. Looking at her pair of extremely panicked eyes, there was a kind of indescribable pleasure in his heart. He looked at her and asked, "Are you afraid?" Shen Manting looked at him in horror, but she shook her head against her will. Shen Luo smiled and approached and said, "Who do you want to warn, huh?" Looking at his appearance, Shen Manting's heart was even more frightened. Her heart was beating very fast, and she couldn't control it. Looking at him like this, Shenmanting's heart was even more frightened, and her heart was beating very fast. Shenluo narrowed his eyes and pressed Shenmanting's writhing body under him. He caressed her body gently with his big hands and said in a low voice, "Tell me, how should I punish you?" Shenmanting's mouth was covered, and she was so frightened that her body trembled slightly. She tried hard to shake her head, and there was a pleading look in her eyes. Shenluo smiled with satisfaction and said, "I'll let you go, but you can't scream. Otherwise, you'll be the unlucky one." Shenmanting nodded, and Shenluo loosened his grip. Fresh air rushed in, and she gasped for breath. Just as she was about to speak, Shenluo pressed her head down and pressed his lips firmly against hers. Shenmanting struggled subconsciously, but Shenluo pressed her down even harder. He was extremely strong, and he had never felt the slightest bit of pity for her. Holding her in his arms, Shenmanting almost convulsed in pain. Chapter 984. Shenluo smiled with satisfaction, and even his movements gradually became gentle. Shenmanting passively accepted his kiss, and the taboo estrangement in her heart grew larger and larger. At this moment, Shenmanting felt that she was simply a pervert. She actually kissed her own brother. Shenluo saw through her thoughts and found that she was no longer fighting. He was very satisfied and said, "That's right. Don't try to refuse me. It won't do you any good." Shenmanting's hands were released. She looked down and found that her hands had been squeezed purple. Shenmanting felt wronged, but she couldn't tell anyone. After all, in this family, she was just an outsider. Shenluo saw her wronged look, so he pitifully kissed her on the cheek and said, "Don't provoke me next time. Otherwise, it won't be as simple as today, my sister." "Sister," Shenmanting trembled and looked at Shenluo in front of her as if she was looking at a madman. However, Shenluo got up, tidied up his clothes, and then walked toward the door. When he went out again, his clothes were neat and tidy. What happened in Shenmanting's room just now, no one found out, and no one saw. In this family, there were always some unspeakable secrets in the dark, waiting for people to uncover. Shenmanting was trembling all over. She took out her mobile phone and called the first person in her mind. However, no one answered. The phone kept ringing in Ming's hand. He leaned against the car door and smoked in annoyance. It was already past 9:00 in the evening, and Lily still hadn't come back. He impatiently hung up the phone, picked up the phone, and called Lily. Lily was having a party with her colleagues when the phone rang. After taking a look and seeing that it was Ming, she turned her head and continued to shout, "Let's forget the right and wrong, and let's reminisce the past. It's always fun to go through hardships together." Yi Qianqian was shaking dice with other colleagues, waving her hand domineeringly and shouting, come on, 5 twos, who wants to compete? 6 threes, pick. I want to open it." Yi Qianqian roared. After opening all the bottles, she realized that there were only 5 threes. She was overjoyed and shouted, "Drink, drink, drink. Bottoms up." Lily saw that they were playing dice so happily, so she immediately threw away the microphone and joined them. However, the phone was still ringing non-stop. Ming got into the car, his mind full of annoyance. When it was almost midnight, he saw a taxi stop. The two women were hugging each other, reeking of alcohol. When they came back drunk, they were still singing. When Ming saw Lily like that, his face suddenly darkened. His first reaction was to shout, "Why did you only come back now? Where did you go to play?" However, before he could say anything, he swallowed all of his words. When Lily saw Ming, she laughed and said, "Ming, you're here again. Aren't you annoying? I can see you every day." You're like a ghost that won't go away. When Yi Qianqian heard what Yu Lily said, she fixed her gaze on Yu Lily. She snorted and yelled, "Scumbag! You already have a boyfriend, yet you still come to harm my Lily. Bah! Shameless!" Chapter 985. Otherwise, Yi Qianqian, who had been scared when she saw him before, wouldn't have the courage to scold him. Unexpectedly, hearing this, Yu Lily held Yi Qianqian and shouted at O Ming, "I'm not drunk." Yi Qianqian also followed Yu Lily's example and shouted, "I'm not drunk either." The two women put their arms around each other's shoulders and laughed out loud. Then they walked inside, stumbling, and it seemed that they were not in a good state. O Ming's lips twitched as if he were looking at two mentally retarded people. Some men passing by also stared at the two of them. Alarm bells rang in O Ming's heart, and he followed them in. The security guard saw O Ming behind them and felt something was wrong, so he asked, "Who are you?" O Ming pointed to Yu Lily and said, "I am her boyfriend." "Liar, you have been there all night. Are you going to do something bad?" The security guard looked at O Ming suspiciously. O Ming was a little helpless and shouted, "Yu Lily." "What?" Yu Lily shouted drunkenly, "Shut up, you are so annoying." O Ming looked at the security guard and said, "You see, she has this reaction when she is drunk. I will send them up and then come down." The security guard looked at him suspiciously, and after confirming that Yu Lily and Yi Qianqian both knew him, he let him in. Yi Qianqian pressed the button for the elevator and walked into the elevator with her arm around Yu Lily's shoulder. The two of them stumbled drunkenly together. O Ming was afraid that they would fall, so he wanted to carry Yu Lily away, but what about Yi Qianqian? He had to watch them from behind and not let them fall. Finally, he followed them up. O Ming watched them enter the password and secretly remembered it. Then he saw Yi Qianqian take out the key drunkenly. "O Ming, why is it so complicated to open the door? Isn't it better to just get a password?" But, fortunately, the two women were drunk and confused, and the man behind them didn't notice. At the same time, O Ming was a little angry at the vigilance of the two women. Fortunately, it was him who followed them. If it was another man, what would he do? Seeing the two of them fall on the sofa, O Ming finally breathed a sigh of relief. He went forward and pulled Yu Lily up. Yu Lily wriggled a little and shouted impatiently, "What are you doing? Don't touch me." O Ming pinched her nose and said in a low voice, "How dare you talk to me like that?" Yu Lily opened her eyes in a daze and seemed to see O Ming. She sneered and said, "I still want to hit you, pervert." O Ming's face darkened. He picked her up and said, "Which is your room?" Yu Lily didn't want him to hold her. She straightened her legs and stretched her arms out. She shouted, "Don't touch me. Don't touch me. UB*TCH. Don't touch me. Go hug another woman, go, scumbag, bah." O Ming's face was gloomy, and he bent her legs. Yu Lily screamed drunkenly, but soon she straightened her legs again. Suddenly, Yi Qianqian jumped up from the sofa and shouted, "Get up. People who don't want to be slaves." Chapter 986. O Ming took a deep breath and directly carried Yu Lily on his shoulder. Yu Lily's body was suspended in the air. She struggled with her hands and feet and shouted, "What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?" Yi Qianqian looked at this side in confusion. After noticing the movement here, Yi Qianqian was a little angry. She put her hands on her hips and shouted, "Who are you? Tell me your name." O Ming held Yu Lily in his arms and felt a headache. In the past, Yu Lily would just lie down and sleep after drinking. How could she go crazy when she was drunk? Sure enough, she was influenced by the company she kept. This Yi Qianqian is really, hey. Oh Ming tried not to let her see him. He tried to open a door and walked in. Fortunately, he saw Yu Lily's digital screen the next day. He carried Yu Lily and walked inside. However, Yu Lily suddenly became quiet and said drunkenly, "What are you doing? Why are you walking around in front of me?" Yu Lily's head was behind him. Oh Ming turned around and saw Yi Qianqian at a glance. Yi Qianqian held a basin in her hand and said, "Shoo, don't be afraid. I will help you kill the bad guys." Oh Ming had an ominous premonition in his heart. Sure enough, before he could say anything, he saw a basin of cold water splashed in his direction. "Aw, aw, aw." Yu Lily screamed and struggled hard. She screamed, "What are you doing? Why did you pour it on me? I am a good person." Oh Ming loosened his hand and put Yu Lily down at once. Oh Ming closed his eyes, wiped his face, and opened his eyes to look at Yi Qianqian. But Yi Qianqian snorted and said seriously, "If you don't accompany me to kill the bad guys, then I have to build a new communist society alone." Oh Ming suddenly felt that it was a mistake for him to follow them, a big mistake. These two people are so tough. What kind of danger can they encounter? I am afraid it is others who are in danger. Yu Lily crawled toward Yi Qianqian from the ground and shouted, "Help, I can't swim. I am going to drown." Yi Qianqian looked at Yu Lily, who was crawling on the ground, and said with contempt, "Silly girl, do you think that is really a swimming pool?" Oh Ming face-bombed, but he finally felt a little relieved. At least he knew it wasn't a swimming pool. Unexpectedly, Yi Qianqian stared at Yu Lily for a long time before saying, "That's shallow water. She won't drown." Yu Lily's eyes were wide open. She was a little confused. "Really?" Yi Qianqian nodded with a serious face and said, "It's true. If you don't believe me, stand up and take a look." Yu Lily stupidly stood up with a look of surprise. "It's true." Oh Ming couldn't stand it anymore. Such a brainless conversation was simply irritating to the ears. He walked up to Yi Qianqian and pushed her out. He locked the door from the inside. Yi Qianqian slammed on the door and shouted, "What are you doing? Why are you chasing me away?" Oh Ming felt like he was about to collapse. He shouted toward the outside, "There are explosives inside. It's dangerous. Report the situation here to the organization. The future of the country depends on you, comrade." When Yi Qianqian heard it, she immediately became serious and shouted, "Yes, sir." Oh Ming breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, she drove him away. He turned around and saw Yu Lily, who had been splashed with water by Yi Qianqian. He sighed and turned over her pajamas. When he was about to pull her up, he found that Yu Lily was staring at him with her eyes open. Oh Ming's heart skipped a beat. He thought she was sober, but then Yu Lily said, "Comrade, where is the bomb hidden?" Dash. Chapter 987. Oh Ming was speechless. He picked her up and patted her on the butt. "Shut up. The bomb has been solved. The organization asked me to help you put on the bulletproof vest." "No." Yu Lily covered her chest with her hands and looked at Oh Ming in front of her with a dangerous expression. Oh Ming was going crazy. He took a deep breath and asked, "Why?" Yu Lily heard this question and was a little stunned. "Why?" Covering her chest, Yu Lily thought for a moment and said in a daze, "Because Oh Ming will be angry." Oh Ming's heart warmed when he heard that. Looking at her silly look, he asked in a low voice, "Who is Oh Ming?" "Oh Ming is a B***tch. Yu Lily said confidently. Oh Ming's original expectations were all gone. He lifted her up and said, "Behave." "No, no, no." Yu Lily's mouth was dry and she was about to cry. Oh Ming will be angry. Is Oh Ming so terrible when he is angry? Is he scared to cry? Oh Ming felt a little funny and asked, "What will happen when Oh Ming is angry?" "I'll scold you, and I'll step on you." It hurts, it hurts." Yu Lily burst into tears. "It really hurts." Shen Luo and said. Oh Ming suddenly felt that he didn't quite understand what she was saying. He didn't deny cursing, but when did he step on her? But Oh Ming was a little helpless and said, "Be good. Your clothes are wet. I will change them for you." "No, I am Oh Ming." Oh Ming sighed and said helplessly, "So, Oh Ming will not be angry, will not curse you, and will not step on you. Be good, change your wet clothes, and then go to sleep, okay?" "Really?" Yu Lily stopped crying and looked at Oh Ming blankly. Looking at his face for a long time, she asked again, "Really?" Oh Ming nodded with certainty and said, "Yes, it's true. It can't be wrong." With that, Oh Ming reached out to lift her clothes and coaxed her in a coaxing tone. "Come on, put on the bulletproof vest." "Oh." Then, Yu Lily really didn't move and let Oh Ming change her clothes for her. After changing, Yu Lily's eyes were closed, and her breathing was even. She had fallen asleep. Oh Ming felt a little helpless and gently put her on the bed. After covering her with the blanket, he planted a gentle kiss on her lips. Then, he stood up and walked out. There was still a comrade outside who had gone to report to the organization. If he got lost, it would be a grave sin. When he walked out, he saw that half of Yi Qianqian's body was hidden under the dining table, and the other half was exposed. She was holding the basin of water that she had just splashed. Her face was up, and her mouth was slightly open. She was snoring softly. She was fast asleep. He could not bear to look at it. Oh Ming covered his eyes, took a blanket from the sofa, and covered her with it. Then, he walked back into Yu Lily's room. Yi Qianqian was awakened by the cold. He opened his eyes and realized that he was lying on the floor like a lunatic. He got up abruptly, but his forehead hit the leg of the dining table. "Dong!" Yi Qianqian covered her forehead and wailed. "Oh my God! Do you have to do this?" At the same time, Yu Lily walked out of the room and rubbed her eyes. Yi Qianqian felt a splitting headache. Why was she sleeping on the floor? Sleeping on the floor was one thing, but why was there a basin of water next to her? Chapter 988. Yi Qianqian wanted to cry. She got up with the help of the table leg and said, "How did we come back last night?" Yu Lily was a little confused and said blankly, "Did we come back by taxi?" "Then why are we different?" Yi Qianqian was cold. Looking at Yu Lily's pajamas, she rubbed her arms and jumped. "I slept on the floor, and you slept on the bed. Why? Why didn't you wake me up? It's so cold on the floor." Yu Lily was also a little confused. She frowned and shook her head. "I don't know. I forgot. I have a headache." "I also have a headache." Yi Qianqian also looked painful and said, "Forget it. I'm going to take a bath to warm myself." "I'm freezing." Yi Qianqian took her pajamas and took a bath. Yu Lily went to the kitchen to make 2 glasses of honey water. She drank one and put the other on the table. She shouted, "Qianqian, there is honey water outside. Remember to drink it." "Okay." Yi Qianqian responded while taking a bath. Then Yu Lily finished drinking and went back to the room. But inadvertently, she saw a dry water stain on the ground, and there was a footprint on it. The footprint was very big. Yu Lily compared it and was sure that it was a man's foot. But who could it be? Yu Lily subconsciously thought of Oh Ming's face. Last night. I seem to have seen him. Is it him? After carrying me back, he changed my clothes. Then he just left Yi Qianqian alone. The more Yu Lily thought about it, the more likely it was. Damn it. I can't remember. Yu Lily knocked her head and fell on the bed like a corpse. When Yi Qianqian came out of the bath, the honey water was still warm. She walked to Yu Lily's room with a headache. At a glance, she saw Yu Lily lying on the bed, gradually falling asleep, but her hands were covering her face. It seemed that she wanted to block the light. Yi Qianqian felt a little funny when she saw Yu Lily like this. She picked up her mobile phone and took a selfie of herself and the honey water in her hand. Standing in front of Yu Lily's table, she clearly took the picture. After taking the picture, Yi Qianqian posted it on WeChat Moments and edited, "The flower of the editorial department covers her face to sleep because she can't see anyone without makeup." As soon as it was posted, many people commented, "Ha ha 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 ha." There were quite a number of people who liked the post. When Yi Qianqian saw the comments below, she was in a good mood and laughed out loud. Yi Qianqian clicked on the notifications one by one. Suddenly, she saw a cute cartoon pig head. It was Shan Yu. Shan Yu liked it. When Yi Qianqian saw Shan Yu, she subconsciously thought of all the unfriendliness Shan Yu had shown her during this period of time. This unfriendliness was fine when it came to Yu Lily, but when it came to Yi Qianqian, Yu Lily almost couldn't help but want to punch her. If Yi Qianqian hadn't stopped her, she had no doubt that Yu Lily would have taught Shan Yu a lesson. At the very least, Shan Yu was no match for Yu Lily when it came to fighting. Yi Qianqian didn't care about it, but she soon saw Shan Yu's comment, "The digital screen at the back looks so familiar." Yi Qianqian didn't know if it was an illusion, but she inexplicably felt that Shan Yu's words had a hidden meaning. Chapter 989. When Yi Qianqian returned to her room, she picked up her phone and scrolled through her WeChat moments. She immediately saw Yi Yuyu's selfie. In the selfie, Yi Yuyu's long hair draped over her shoulders, revealing her fair and delicate side profile. She was smiling, and behind her was a retro telephone. It should be something from the Shen family. There were words on it, "Contentment brings happiness." Yi Qianqian's heart ached when she saw those words. Yi Qianqian felt both sympathy and envy for her younger sister, whom she had been separated from at a young age. Yi Qianqian sympathized with Yi Qianqian's unhappiness in her family, but at the same time, she envied Yi Qianqian's wealth in her family. She also envied Yi Qianqian's horizons and social circle. Yi Qianqian followed her mother, and her stepfather was an honest working-class man. Yi Qianqian liked Yi Yuyu's post and sent a smiley face. When Yi Yuyu saw Yi Qianqian's message, she smiled and quickly put her phone away. Shen Luoan was busy with work. After the winter solstice, he continued to be busy. Everyone in the family was busy. Shen Jilia and Shen Manting were going to Kingstown together. Coincidentally, Yi Yuyu had a schedule in Kingstown, so they agreed to go together. However, to everyone's surprise, old Mrs. Shen refused to let Yi Yuyu leave. She insisted that she stay one more day. Yi Yuyu had no choice but to stay for another day and let Shen Jilia and Shen Manting leave first. After Shen Jilia and Shen Manting left, old Mrs. Shen said, "I want to go to Kingstown too." Seeing Yi Yuyu's surprise, old Mrs. Shen sneered with dissatisfaction and said in a somewhat bitter tone, "What? You're an actress, and you're afraid of bringing an old woman like me with you? Are you afraid of losing face?" When Yi Yuyu heard that, her heart skipped a beat. She quickly waved her hands and explained, "There's no such thing, Grandma. How would I dare to do that? It's just that it will take a long time to get to Kingstown. If we take a plane, I'm afraid. I took the high-speed train the last time. This time, let's take the high-speed train together. Old Mrs. Shin glanced at Yi Yu, but her expression remained haughty. Seeing the embarrassment on Yi Yu's face, old Mrs. Shin said with a straight face, "You don't want to. Just now, little uncle and little aunt were together, why didn't you? It's impossible for them to bring me there. If Long Yu finds out, they will definitely be scolded." Yi Yu was speechless. She would be scolded, too. Moreover, because she was an outsider, she would be scolded even more harshly. Old Mrs. Shin seemed to know what she was thinking, but she didn't care. She looked at her arrogantly and said, "You don't want to. Yesterday, you said that you would be filial to him, but now I've forgotten about it. How hypocritical." Yi Yu felt that it was inappropriate and said, "Grandma, do you want to tell Mom and Dad? I think you just can't wait to take me along. If I tell them, will they let me out?" Old Mrs. Shen was furious. She stood up from the sofa and said angrily, "Forget it. I'll go by myself. You just want me to go out and get killed, don't you? I've seen through you a long time ago." Yi Yu couldn't bear to hear that. She pulled the old lady and said, "Grandma, I'll take you there." Old Mrs. Shin had expected this. She snorted and said, "Help me pack my things. We'll leave in the afternoon." Chapter 990. The old lady was the one in charge of the family. No matter what the Shin family wanted to do, as long as they didn't get the approval of the old lady, they couldn't do it. Except Shin Luo Han's marriage to her. However, there was nothing between her and Shin Luo and except a marriage certificate and a ring. There was no wedding photos, and no sex between husband and wife. Everything seemed like it was just a make-do. Only she was trying her best to cater to him. If you love him, you have to cater to everything about him, right? The weekend passed quickly. After Yu Lily handed over the 5th episode of Love Transaction on Sunday night, the dramatic reversal of the plot caused a lot of controversy. Also because of Love Transaction, the number of downloads of the Eurasian Comics app increased, and the number of downloads was in the tens of thousands. Yi Qianqian's performance skyrocketed, and she became the queen of performance that many people in the editorial department envied. Monday. It was rare that Yi Qianqian didn't ride the bike. She was a little excited and walked with Yu Lily. Yu Lily chatted with Yi Qianqian all the way to the company. After they said hello, they saw the surrounding colleagues pointing at them and whispering to each other. Yi Qianqian sat in her seat, but as soon as she sat down, she heard her boss, Editor-in-Chief Zhou, shouting, "Yi Qianqian, come to my office." Editor-in-Chief Zhou rarely talked to Yi Qianqian. This old woman was a little cold. Recently, except for some boys in the technical department and Yu Lily, Editor-in-Chief Zhou rarely talked to anyone. It was the first time that she directly called out Yi Qianqian for trouble like today. Everyone's eyes fell on Yi Qianqian, and they whispered. Yi Qianqian had no idea what was going on, and so did Yu Lily. Seeing Yi Qianqian being called into the office, Yu Lily looked around. She found that everyone's eyes were strange, except for Shan Yu. She sat next to Yi Qianqian with a calm face and was picking up a stack of contracts. Shan Yu had been targeting her and Yi Qianqian more than once or twice recently. Seeing Shan Yu's appearance, Yu Lily was sure that this matter must have something to do with her. Yu Lily stood up and didn't directly ask Shan Yu. Instead, she asked a colleague next to her, "What's the matter? Why is everyone acting so weird today?" The colleague looked at Yu Lily with a strange expression and asked, "Are you living with Yi Qianqian?" "Yeah, what's wrong?" The colleague's expression became even weirder. "We suspect that she pocketed the gift that was supposed to be given to the painter." It's worth a lot. Chief editor Zhou may be checking with her now. When Yu Lily heard that, she frowned and blurted out, how is that possible? If Yi Qianqian would do something like that, how could I not know? There is only one truth, Shan Yu suddenly said. She stood up and looked at Yu Lily. You two are in cahoots. Of course, you have to pretend to be stupid. Otherwise, how could you not know such a big thing was placed there? Yu Lily was annoyed to see Shan Yu like this. She snorted and asked, what did Yi Qianqian take away? Is it expensive? How much? Chapter 991. Shan Yu looked at Yu Lily with a distressed look and said, I didn't expect you to be such a person. You are in cahoots with each other. When Yu Lily heard that, she laughed and said, how did you know? See, you admit it. Shan Yu looked at her with a disappointed look and said, last time, I saw the chat window between you and Yi Qianqian. I clearly saw that you were chatting, and you were talking about gifts. Yu Lily heard this and subconsciously looked back, but she couldn't remember. After all, it had been a long time. However, hearing such words, Yu Lily shook her head and said, your glasses are so old. How can you see those things so clearly? As she spoke, Yu Lily reached out to Shan Yu's eyes. Shan Yu's face changed. She reflexively reached out and patted Yu Lily's hand, shouting, Yu Lily, don't go too far. Yu Lily's face also darkened. She sneered, looked at her angrily, and said sarcastically, I just want to see if your thick glasses are as ugly as you look. The merciless sarcasm made Shan Yu's face suddenly distorted. She gritted her teeth and shouted, shut up. What's the saying? Yu Lily deliberately tilted her head in thought for a moment, then said, ugly people make more trouble. It probably means you, right? Not being good-looking had always been the biggest pain in Shan Yu's heart. Usually, people around her knew that she was sensitive, so they rarely used such an obvious weakness to satirize her. Hearing Yu Lily's words, Shan Yu's eyes were red with anger. She flew into a rage and shouted, don't go too far. So what if you are good-looking? You are still a thief. You don't know how to dispose of the stolen goods. You were caught by others, but you still have such an attitude. You are shameless. Yu Lily heard this and smiled proudly. She raised her eyebrows and said, there are many benefits to being good-looking. For example, people will not say that ugly people make more trouble. Shan Yu was even more angry and shouted, you thief, how dare you quibble? When did I quibble? Yu Lily retorted. Do you know what quibbling means? You don't know what it means, yet you're still using random words. Didn't your language teacher die early? If he knew that you were using words so carelessly, wouldn't he be so angry that he wouldn't rest in peace? Shan Yu was at a loss for words. She stared at Yu Lily with her red eyes and paused for a moment before saying, so, you admit it? What did he admit? Yu Lily looked at her hopeless expression and laughed proudly. You're so stupid. Don't try to frame others. Yes, the digital screen is indeed in our possession. Yu Lily looked at Yi Qianqian with a smile. See? Shan Yu was overjoyed. She looked around at her colleagues and said, admit it. The surrounding colleagues all looked at each other and said one after another, it can't be. I can't believe Yi Qianqian would do such a thing. She relied on Li Xiaoyu to get to where she is today. She even swallowed Li Xiaoyu's digital screen. How terrifying. Sigh, looks like we won't be able to be kind this time. Chapter 992. Did you steal it? Shan Yu looked at Yu Lily incredulously. But in her heart, she was even more proud. Originally, she just wanted Yi Qianqian to pay a little price, but she didn't expect that Yu Lily would be directly exposed. If this matter were to be carried out, then Yu Lily would definitely not be able to get the promotion that she originally had. Moreover, Yu Lily was still a newcomer. Maybe she would be fired directly. Shan Yu was a little excited in her heart, but she still pretended to be calm and looked at Yu Lily in front of her. Yu Lily snorted and said, "The company gave it to me, so of course it is mine." "You?" Shan Yu heard that and laughed. "This is for Li Xiaoyu, right? Are you Li Xiaoyu?" "Yes, I'm Li Xiaoyu," Yu Lily said calmly. But, let alone Shan Yu, even other colleagues didn't believe it. Shan Yu laughed and said, "Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? If you are really Li Xiaoyu, then you are as arrogant as the people above you." Yu Lily heard Shan Yu's words, also laughed and said, "Do you think you know me very well? Idiot! I am not a fairy that an ugly person like you can see through." Shan Yu's face turned greener and she roared, "Yu Lily, you are shameless. I am not like you. How can I not have such a beautiful face? What are you arguing about?" The voice of Editor-in-Chief Zhou came out at the same time as Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian walked toward Yu Lily, but she stared straight at Shan Yu and said, "What hatred do I have for you? Why do you frame me like this?" Editor-in-Chief Zhou came over, looked at Shan Yu, and said, "I have asked about the matter. The digital screen has indeed been sent out." Shan Yu was stunned and said, "What's going on? Is it, Yu Lily, are you Li Xiaoyu?" Editor-in-Chief Zhou looked at Yu Lily with surprise in her eyes. "Love transaction was drawn by you?" "Yes." Yu Lily smiled brightly and nodded. "It turns out that you didn't know. I thought you could see it backstage." Editor-in-Chief Zhou looked at Yu Lily for a long time, shook her head, laughed, and said, "I didn't expect you to be so powerful. When Yi Qianqian told me just now, I didn't believe her. I did a background check and even matched her ID number. Sigh, I didn't expect that." Editor-in-Chief Zhou's words stunned everyone around her. Shan Yu's expression suddenly became interesting. Looking at Yu Lily and Yi Qianqian, she seemed a little embarrassed. She looked at Yu Lily and said, "You are Li Xiaoyu. How could that be?" Yi Qianqian had never been cold to anyone, but this time she couldn't help it. She looked at Shan Yu with a sullen face and said, "I'm not like you. You are useless all day long and full of bad ideas. You actually want to frame me. F***ck, I'm not bad to you, right? Why do you have to do this?" Shan Yu's face turned even paler. She looked at Yi Qianqian and shouted, "Qianqian, Editor-in-Chief Zhou, I don't need her to be my assistant anymore. Shan Yu is absent-minded during work every day. There have been several contract problems, and I have to solve them myself. She is not serious and responsible, and she is forgetful. She is so annoying. Dash. Chapter 993. Shan Yu's face finally changed. She shouted, "Qianqian, I didn't do that. Don't frame me. You know in your heart whether I did it or not. I've had enough of it. I'm your boss, but you give me a cold shoulder every day. Editor-in-Chief Zhou, you do as you see fit. Anyway, I don't want her to be my assistant. It's boring. It's as if everything she does is my fault. So, you're blaming me for being ugly and useless." Every word that Yi Qianqian said was very hurtful. Yu Lily raised her eyebrows and looked at Yi Qianqian. They saw a tacit understanding in each other's eyes. It was easy to pick up each other's habits after spending a long time with each other. If it had been before, Yi Qianqian would never have said such a thing. Now that she had said it, she didn't feel guilty at all. Shan Yu was speechless. Editor-in-Chief Zhou looked at Shan Yu and said, "Shan Yu, come in with me." Editor-in-Chief Zhou took the lead and walked into the office. Shan Yu stood in the same place. After looking at Yi Qianqian and Yu Lily, she followed Editor-in-Chief Zhou into the office. As soon as Shan Yu and Editor-in-Chief Zhou left, they all came to Yu Lily incredulously and asked, "Lily, so you are Li Xiaoyu?" "Oh my god, the goddess was hiding around us. None of us found out. You are so low-key." Yu Lily felt their incredible eyes. She smiled unconsciously and said, "It's okay. I'm just afraid that if I say it, I will face your eyes of worship. It will be very stressful." When everyone heard this, they rolled their eyes and quickly dispersed. Yu Lily looked very frustrated and said, "Don't do this. Don't leave me alone." However, no one paid attention to her. It was no different from usual. Yu Lily looked disappointed, but in her heart, she breathed a sigh of relief. Yu Lily continued to work. She was still doing the same work as usual, but today seemed to be destined to be a little different. Shan Yu stayed in Editor-in-Chief Zhou's office for a long time before she came out. Her eyes were red, and she stared at Yu Lily with jealousy. Then, Yu Lily was also called in. Editor-in-Chief Zhou sat in front of the computer, looked at Yu Lily, and said, "Shan Yu is still not suitable here. I learned that she is not very popular and forgetful. So, I transferred her to the front desk. Now, there is only one person who can be promoted to the position of editor, and it can only be you." Yu Lily had expected it, but she still couldn't help but be surprised. Her eyes lit up, and she looked at Editor-in-Chief Zhou in front of her and shouted, "Really? Well, let's not talk about your identity as Li Xiaoyu first. You're very capable in all aspects. Of course, this position is yours. Good luck." More importantly, Editor-in-Chief Zhou had once faced the crisis of being fired, and it was Yu Lily who helped her stay. Yu Lily should be promoted regardless of whether it was for the public or for personal reasons. Yu Lily cheered and shouted, "Thank you, Chief Editor Zhou." Editor-in-Chief Zhou nodded and said, "Go to work. Ask Yi Qianqian to take you." "All right." Yu Lily walked out and quickly entered a new state of work. Chapter 994. Yu Lily followed Yi Qianqian to learn the precautions for her new position and some routine operations. They spent the whole morning learning. After lunch, Yu Lily and Yi Qianqian were about to go back to the company when they received a phone call. She was in the capital. Yu Lily didn't need to pick up the phone, but she had already guessed who it was. It was none other than the Shen family. Unfortunately, Yu Lily didn't have a good impression of the Shen family at all. Because of Shen Manting, Shen Luofen, and also because of Shen Longyue's disdain and shock after hearing her identity. The only person who left a good impression on her was the old lady of the Shen family. Fortunately, it was all good news. Yu Lily couldn't help but feel a lot more relaxed. But the phone kept calling, and Yu Lily set the phone to silent mode. When she returned to the company, Yu Lily picked up the phone and found that there were more than a dozen missed calls and several text messages. She picked up the phone and clicked on the text messages. There were several in a row. "I came to Kingstown to find you. Where are you? I am the old lady of the Shen family. You saved me. Thank you very much for that day. Miss, answer the phone." Just as Yu Lily finished reading these text messages, another phone call came in. Yu Lily picked up the phone this time, and there was an old voice coming from the other side. "Hello, is that you, miss?" "It's me." Yu Lily felt a little strange. Listening to the voice on the other side, that tone didn't seem to be talking to an outsider. When old Mrs. Shen heard Yu Lily's answer, she was a little relieved and happy. She said, "You finally answered the phone. Where are you? I'll go to play with you, okay? Well, Grandma, why are you in Kingstown again? Didn't you go back to the capital? Did you come all the way here to find your grandson? No, I'm here to look for you. What's so fun about looking for grandchildren? They're not filial at all. You're the best. Old Madam Shin's aged voice sounded. She sighed. If an old woman like me were to be seen by my grandchildren on the streets, they would definitely ignore me. But you saved me. I can tell that you are my fated person. To be honest, there is an evil aura in my life. When I looked at your physiognomy and palmistry, I realized that you and I complement each other. Miss, you can help me resolve that evil aura. Also, I can help you solve some problems that you can't solve. Lily was a little mystified. Such a thing was really amazing. Lily believed some of it, but not all of it. Hearing the old lady's words, Lily suddenly felt that something was wrong. Could this old woman be a swindler? However, since she was Enchanting's grandmother, it shouldn't be possible. When old Mrs. Shin heard that Lily was silent, she asked, "Where are you?" I'm working in the company." I see. I'm alone at the station now. I don't know how to get there. Can you tell me the address? Well. Lily felt a little embarrassed and said, "Why don't you call someone to pick you up? Call Enchanting or Enchanting." Chapter 995. Let Ming pick her up. When Lily heard this, she immediately thought of the relationship between her and Ming. Although Enchanting and Ming were not married yet, both parents should have met each other. Ming was also her future grandson-in-law. After Lily asked her for the address, she called Ming. Ming was in a meeting, and everyone in the meeting room was a little anxious because the mealtime was delayed. However, without Ming's permission, no one could leave. Therefore, it dragged on like this, and no one was able to suggest that they should leave first. What everyone didn't expect was that Ming, who seemed to be in a bad mood just now, immediately stopped talking after seeing a phone call. Everyone stared at Ming, and no one dared to speak. Ming picked up the phone as if there was no one else around and waited for the other side to speak first. Ming. Yes. Lily thought about her words and said, Enchanting's grandmother is in the station. Now she is waiting for someone to pick her up. You go pick her up. I have to go to work and have no time to go. Enchanting's grandmother. Ming felt a little surprised. How do you know? Since it was Enchanting's grandmother, why did she come to you, Lily? She called me. Ming felt even more strange. The old lady of the Shin family had a very strange temper. She treated many people with an aloof look, and her mouth was full of the book of changes. She was a liar. Every time she saw him, she would praise him, unspeakably noble, unspeakably noble. However, apart from this sentence, there was nothing else. Now she came to Kingstown to find Lily instead of Enchanting or Enchanting. Why? Ming asked subconsciously. Such a thing was too strange. Lily felt a little helpless. How would I know? Anyway, she asked you to pick her up. I have already told her. It is your business whether you pick her up or not. After that, Lily hung up the phone directly. Ming listened to the busy tone coming from the phone and looked up. The whole meeting room was staring at him. Ming's face was still calm, and he said calmly, "Where were we?" Old Mrs. Shin knew that Ming would never come to pick her up. Sitting on a bench at the bus stop, old Mrs. Shin took out her cell phone and called Lily again. Yu watched her from the side. She felt that when the old lady faced others, she was completely different from when she faced her. Old Mrs. Han was aloof and virtuous toward strangers and treated her own family with respect. She had a proud attitude toward many people, but when it came to Yi Yu, her face was full of disgust. She didn't even try to hide her unruly attitude. Could it really be because of the so-called confirmation of fate? Just as she was deep in thought, she felt a gentle pat on her shoulder. Yi Yu was shocked and turned her head to look. His gaze collided with a pair of chilly and aloof eyes that were like the cool breeze and clear moon in a midsummer night. Just a glance was enough to make one forget to leave. When she saw who he was, she turned pale with fright. She immediately turned her head around and pretended not to know him. "That's right," Li Jinan said. Chapter 996. Yi Yu almost blurted out the words, which made her feel even more wonderful. Li Jinan heard the old lady's straightforward praise, grinned, and nodded politely. "Hello." Yi Yu stood up and said to the old lady, "Grandma, let me take you there. It's faster." Old Mrs. Shen was a little unhappy when she heard this. She turned her head and glared at Yi Yu, saying, "What? Are you impatient? Well, a few days ago you wanted to be filial to me. Now you're like this. You're so hypocritical." Yi Yu was used to the old lady's tone, but today she said it in front of Li Jinan, which made Yi Yu feel more embarrassed than ever. How could she? Yi Yu's face was burning, and she explained, "No, Grandma, you misunderstood me. I think you just want to get rid of me quickly, and then do your own things, right? I knew that you were already holding a grudge when I asked you to stay at home for one more day yesterday." Old Mrs. Shen's tone was a little bitter. When she spoke, she stared at Yi Yu with some resentment. "No, who is this?" Old Mrs. Shen interrupted Yi Yu and pointed to Li Jinan. "Hello, my name is Li Jinan." Li Jinan smiled and looked at the old lady. "What's your relationship?" Old Mrs. Shen's eyes were full of shrewdness. She looked at Li Jinan and then at Yi Yu and snorted. Yi Yu felt a little nervous. Inexplicably, Yi Yu was a little afraid of this old lady. Although she liked to spout nonsense most of the time, people had no choice but to believe what she said. Moreover, she often said that she could tell something from a person's face. At this moment, Yi Yu's heart couldn't help but beat faster. Will she find out that I am Li Jinan? It's over, it's a mess. Yi Yu hurriedly said, "Grandma, he is my boss, my boss. So that's how it is. I said that you can't hook such a good guy with such a bad life." As she said that, she looked at Li Jinan with a smile and said, "Brotherly, right? Oh, you look really good. Can I see your hand?" Li Jinan nodded. Li Jinan was baffled. He had never encountered such a situation before. Seeing old Mrs. Shen's radiant smile, Li Jinan glanced at Yi Yu with a smile and extended his left hand. Old Mrs. Shen's eyes lit up when she saw his hand. Holding it with both hands, he looked at it carefully and said, "What a good broken palm. If you were born in ancient times, you would be either an emperor or a prince. You would be rich and powerful all your life. It's a pity that it was broken at the peak of your life. Did you give up on a particularly good future?" Li Jinan withdrew his hand, feeling a little creeped out by the old lady's words. He used to be a major in the military but later retired. He was almost beaten to death by Li Xiao. But how did this old lady know? How mysterious. Li Jinan cleared his throat and asked, Grandma, how did you know?" I am a half-immortal, there is nothing that I do not know." Old Mrs. Shen was a little proud. Suddenly, she saw a figure in the distance. Old Mrs. Shen was a little excited and shouted, "Miss, I'm here." Yu Lily saw old Mrs. Shen with Yi Yu and Li Jinan by her side. She was shocked, but she still walked over. Chapter 997. Old Mrs. Shen was a little happy to see you, Lily. She took her hand and turned to look at Li Jinnan. What do you think of this young man? While talking, she leaned over to Yu Lily and said, this young man is good. He is much better than O Ming. Yu Lily turned her head and looked at old Mrs. Shen strangely. Does this old lady want to introduce me to a boyfriend? She even compared O Ming with Li Jinnan. Yu Lily felt a little embarrassed. Why is this old lady so friendly? As far as I know, the Shen family and the Li family should have no relationship. Old Mrs. Shen made Yu Lily feel a little embarrassed on the spot. She smiled, looked at Li Jinnan, and said, Third Master Li, why are you here? I was passing by and happened to see Miss Yi, so I came to say hello. Do you know this old lady? Of course I know her. Before Yu Lily could speak, the old lady spoke first and said, This girl is my destined person. She saved my life. Yu Lily was even more embarrassed. Looking at her arm being held by old Mrs. Shen, she said, Why did you come here by yourself? I'd better call your grandson or granddaughter. I didn't save their numbers. You can call them. Yu Lily had the habit of cleaning up records. Sometimes when she was bored, she would clear the records. Therefore, she didn't save their numbers at all. Otherwise, Yu Lily wouldn't have come alone because she was worried about the old lady. Yi Yu saw the intimate look of old Mrs. Shen holding Yu Lily's arm and felt a little strange. It turned out that old Mrs. Shen, who had always been mean in front of her, had such a side. It seemed that old Mrs. Shen wanted to stick to this girl. Old Mrs. Shen wouldn't treat anyone like this. At the same time, Yi Yu also felt a little uncomfortable. She said hello to Yu Lily and said, Hello, we meet again. Yu Lily naturally recognized that this was Yi Qianqian's sister. She nodded with a smile and said, You and this old lady, I don't know her. I'm just passing by. Old Mrs. Shen pushed her gently, then reached out to pull the luggage and said, Let's go. Where are you going? Yu Lily looked at the old lady and felt a little distressed. I don't know where your grandson is. But soon, she thought of something and sent a message to O Ming, Give me Enchanting's number. O Ming had just finished a meeting and sat alone in the conference room. After looking at it, he called Yu Lily. Yu Lily quickly picked up. O Ming was inexplicably relieved and asked, Enchanting is Shen. Grandma is at the station. You can ask her to pick you up. No, don't let them come over. Old Mrs. Shen snatched the phone from Yu Lily's hand and hung up. She said pitifully, They abuse the elderly. I have no choice but to come to you. Young lady, I beg you. Don't call them over, okay? Yu Lily's eyes widened. You and Wang. You and you Mrs. Yu, Lily thought. You and Li. Mrs. You Mrs. with you. At. Chapter 998. Yi Yu's words were intended to help Yu Lily and the old lady out of the situation. Yu Lily suddenly remembered what their relationship was. It seemed that Shen Luo and was the grandson of old Mrs. Shen, and Yi Yu was his wife. After sorting out their relationship, Yu Lily felt that their family was really chaotic. Yu Lily didn't want to get involved in this mess, so she nodded in response to Yi Yu's words. However, old Mrs. Shen's skin was much thicker than Yu Lily had imagined. Old Mrs. Shen stared at her and said, What do you mean? The fate between me and Lily is not something that an ordinary person like you can see. Don't try to sow discord between us. The little girl likes me very much. How can she feel troubled? Right? Girl. There was a very obvious expectation on old Mrs. Shen's face. A pair of slightly turbid eyes seemed to shine as she looked at Yu Lily. Yu Lily immediately felt that she was being relied on. Suddenly, she felt a headache coming on. She was a little embarrassed and helpless. She looked at the old woman who was full of anticipation and said, "Grandma, you'd better go with your granddaughter-in-law. I'm still at work. I thought you were here alone. If I had known that Missy was here, I wouldn't have come. I'm a little busy over there, it's okay. You take me to your company. You do your work. I won't make any trouble." Old Mrs. Shin looked at Yu Lily with an expression that said, "I'm the most honest and obedient." She nodded her head vigorously to show that she was being honest. Yu saw that Yu Lily didn't want to take the old lady with her, so she was also embarrassed. She pulled old Mrs. Shin and said, "Grandma, I'll take you to my place first. After this lady gets off work, I'll take you to see her. Is that okay?" Yu Lily took advantage of the situation and said, "Yes, I'm very busy. If I don't do my work well, I will be fired." As she said that, she looked distressed and full of helplessness. When old Mrs. Shin saw Yu Lily's expression, she also realized that she seemed to be a little too capricious. After thinking for a while, she said, "Well, you do your work first. Don't leave me behind, okay?" Leave? For an old man to say such a thing to her, it was as if Yu Lily had done something heinous. At the same time, he was filled with regret. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have come. Now, this old lady clearly wanted to rely on him. What should I do? Yu looked at Yu Lily and said, "In that case, can you accompany my grandmother to find a hotel? Please." Facing Yuyu's gaze and the old lady's, Yu Lily couldn't help but nod her head. Li Jinan looked at his watch and said, "My time is almost up. You go find a hotel first. I'll go first." "All right, go ahead." Old Mrs. Shin looked at Li Jinan with a smile. She then looked at Yu and asked, "Do you have his number?" Yu felt a little guilty. Did the old madam notice something? She hesitated for a moment before nodding her head. "Yes. That's good. Young man, go ahead." Li Jinan nodded politely and turned to leave. Old Mrs. Shin turned around, took out her mobile phone, and said, "Give me the phone number of that young man." Yu Lily. Chapter 999. Yu was embarrassed. Under Yu Lily's strange gaze, her face was a little hot. What does the old lady want to do? Is it really because he is handsome, and then, can't help it? Does she want to flirt with a man? But Li Jinan is less than 30 years old, and he is almost the same age as Shen Luofen. Is this not good? However, the other party is Shen Luofan's most respected grandmother. Yu did not dare to question it and directly saved the number for her. Then, Yu Lily helped Yu and the old lady find a hotel and helped the old lady move things in. Just before Yu Lily left, old Mrs. Shin looked at Yu Lily with a pair of pitiful eyes and said, "You must come, don't leave me." Yu Lily vaguely answered, did not say that she would come, did not say that she would not come. Back at the company, when Yu Lily met with Yi Chan, she couldn't help complaining. Yu Lily told him all the helplessness she had felt, starting from when she had saved the old lady. Yi Chan was stunned and said, "What a big weirdo. Isn't it?" Yu Lily sighed helplessly. "Anyway, I don't dare to go to her. I feel that I will be blamed. It is not easy to be a good person these days. Be smart, don't stir up so much trouble. Oh, by the way, the girl who was with Li Lao-san last time, is she your sister?" "Yes, what's wrong?" "I just thought I saw her. She was with the old lady." "The old lady is Shen Luo-an's grandmother. Yu was with her just now. When we went to find the hotel, she also went with them." Yi Chan was even more shocked and said, "Really? it turned out to be this old lady. Damn it, this old lady is really perverted in her decisiveness. This old woman has been targeting our Yu and treating her very badly. Although I haven't seen her in person, I feel that this old woman is extremely arrogant just by listening to what Yu and my mother said. If it's this old woman, you can't hook up with so many women. What if she goes crazy and bites you? Lily laughed but did not answer. She was busy until she got off work. During this period, the old lady called Lily many times, but Lily directly ignored her. Yu accompanied the old lady in the hotel and waited for Lily to get off work. The old lady took out her cell phone and made countless calls, but Lily did not answer. Old Mrs. Shen was a little depressed. She leaned against the window of the hotel and looked out. She looked very gloomy. Her manager and good friend, Mira, had already called her countless times, but she didn't dare answer any of them. She looked at the time. She had to go to work at 6:30 p.m., but she was worried about leaving the old lady here alone. She glanced at the old lady and wanted to call Enchanting or Enchanting, but she didn't dare to. If the old lady knew about it, she might scold her even more. By that time, Brother Luo and would be even more, don't you have something to do? Then go do it. I'll be fine here alone. Chapter 1000. Old Mrs. Shen was a little impatient. She waved her hand and said, "Do you think I'm a child? Go." Yu didn't stay any longer. She left the hotel and took a taxi. Yu arrived at the recording site at 6:00. She put on makeup and got ready, just in time for the recording. After about 2 hours, the recording was over. After it was over, Yu found that Shen Luo and had called her several times. She was ecstatic and immediately called him back. Shen Luo and picked up the phone, but his voice was a little gloomy. He said, "Yu, where did you take Grandma?" Hearing this tone, Yuyu's original joy suddenly seemed to be poured down by a basin of cold water, and it suddenly cooled down a lot. "Grandma said she wanted to come to Kingstown, but she didn't let me tell you, so you took Grandma to Kingstown? Yu, are you crazy? You are an actress. You have to film every day. How can you have time to take care of Grandma? Do you want Grandma to go with you to film?" Actress, those 2 words brought a great deal of humiliation to Yu. The Shen family was like this. They called her profession an actress and said it with a contemptuous tone. However, Yu thought that Shen Luo and was different. After all, he had never said such words in front of her. But at this moment, Yu felt very uncomfortable and defended, "Brother Luo and I'm an actress, not an actress, what's the difference?" Shen Luo and asked with a sneer, "Grandma hates you so much. How can she go to Kingstown with you? How did you trick her?" No matter what, you have to bring Grandma home right now. Dad and Mom are going crazy. Do you know how serious the consequences will be if you act so insensibly? Shen Luo and sounded very angry. "You're the one who brought Grandma home. Grandma is fine in the hotel. She won't." Yu tried to explain, but Shen Luo and didn't give her a chance to speak at all. "Yu, I know Grandma doesn't like you, and you're very upset, but it's not a good way to please the old people. Now, Mom and Dad are very angry about this matter. You'd better bring her back quickly. Yu, I know Grandma doesn't like you, and you're very upset, but it's not the right way to please the old people." Yuyu's heart felt as if it had been pried open. She felt extremely uncomfortable. All right. On the way back to the hotel, Yu tried to organize the words in her head. She hoped that the old lady wouldn't scold her too harshly. When she reached the hotel, she realized that the old lady had disappeared. Yuyu's heart skipped a beat, and her expression changed drastically. He turned around and went to the bathroom, the balcony, and after looking around, he did not find the old lady. The suitcase was nowhere to be seen, but the hotel key card was still in the room. Her face immediately turned pale. Thinking of the time when the old lady sneaked into Kingstown and almost got into trouble, her heart felt like it was going to fly out. He called the old lady, but the robotic female voice indicated that the other party's phone was turned off. It's over, it's over, it's over, it's over. If something really happened to old Mrs. Shin, the Shins would never let her off. How could Shin Luo let her off? What should he do? Chapter 1001. Since the old lady likes you Lily so much, she must have gone to find you Lily, right? But I don't have you Lily's cell phone number at all. What should I do? In a panic, Yi Yuyu thought of Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian seems to live with you Lily, right? When Yi Qianqian received Yi Yuyu's call, she was sitting on the sofa watching a Korean drama. Seeing Yi Yuyu's call, she immediately picked it up and was ready to ask her about the strange things that happened today. But Yi Yuyu's first sentence was, "Sister, is your roommate there?" "Yes." Yi Qianqian was a little confused. "Why are you looking for her?" "Let her answer the phone. I have something to talk to her about." "Oh." Yi Qianqian took the phone and immediately jumped to Yu Lily's room. She knocked on the door and walked in, then gave the phone to her. "Hello, I'm Yi Yuyu. We met at the train station today," Yi Yuyu said. Yu Lily knew who she was and asked, "What's wrong? Have you seen my grandmother?" "I just went to work, and when I came back, I found that she was gone, and her phone was turned off." As she spoke, Yu Lily could clearly hear the panic in her voice. "You saved her last time. If something happened to her on the road this time," Yu Lily was shocked. She also knew that this was not a trivial matter, so she comforted her, "Don't worry too much. Let's split up and go to the places where the old lady might go." "Does she know anyone here?" "Yes. Shen Manting and Shen Jilia." All of a sudden, Yi Yuyu thought of them and said, "I'll call them. It's my aunt and uncle." "Okay." While talking on the phone, Yu Lily also stood up, put on a coat, and said, "I'll also go out to look for her. If there is any news, let's inform each other." "Thank you." Yi Yuyu was about to cry. After hanging up the phone, Yu Lily briefly explained the situation to Yi Qianqian and went out to look for her. Speaking of the places where the old lady might go, the first thing that came to Yu Lily's mind was the busy street where she saved the old lady last time. Yu Lily didn't understand why the old lady liked her so much. But, if she guessed correctly, the old lady's disappearance was likely to be looking for her. Yu Lily and Yi Qianqian immediately headed in that direction. As expected, when Yu Lily reached the road, she saw old Mrs. Shin sitting on her suitcase by the roadside. That place was where the old lady had been lying the last time Yu Lily had found her. Yu Lily felt a little speechless, but she immediately went forward and called out, "Grandma, so you're here." When old Mrs. Shin saw Yu Lily, her eyes immediately lit up and she shouted, "Miss Lily, you're here. Oh, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Why are there so many mosquitoes in such cold weather in Kingstown?" "Because this is the South. It's different from the North." Yu Lily was a little helpless. She helped her pull up the suitcase and said, "I'll take you back to the hotel. Miss Yi is looking for you urgently." Chapter 1002. Yi Qianqian felt very puzzled when she heard the old lady's words. Yu Lily doesn't seem to know this old woman well, does she? Yi Yuyu was right. That old woman was sick in the head. Yu Lily was a little embarrassed. She immediately changed the topic and said, have you eaten? Old Mrs. Shen was moved. She shook her head and said, no, I'm so hungry. Yu Lily was speechless. Yi Qianqian picked up her mobile phone and called Yi Yuyu. After telling her the address, she found a restaurant with Yu Lily and sat down. The old lady hadn't eaten yet. As soon as she arrived at the restaurant and ordered, she immediately began to eat. When Yi Yuyu arrived, there were two people following behind her. Enchanting and Shenjilia. When Yi Qianqian saw Shenjilia, her eyes lit up and she shouted, it's you. What are you doing here? Shenjilia was also surprised to see her and said, I'm here to see my grandmother. Do you know my grandmother? Yi Qianqian's eyes widened. Your grandmother? Isn't she Yi Yuyu's grandmother? Well, Yi Yuyu is my sister-in-law. Yi Qianqian should be glad that she didn't drink water. Otherwise, she would have spat it out at this moment. The world is so big, but the circle is so small. Shenjilia is actually Yi Yuyu's uncle. In other words, he is Shen Luo's younger brother. Oh my god, how could there be such a coincidence? Uncle, do you know my sister? Yi Yuyu came up from behind. After seeing that the old lady was safe and sound, she quietly breathed a sigh of relief. When Shenjilia heard Yi Yuyu shout, he felt a little strange. Is she your sister? So, we are relatives by marriage, haha. Shenjilia laughed, looked at Yu Lily and said, where did you find my grandmother? I didn't know that you were the kind-hearted person who saved my grandmother last time. My grandmother also likes you very much. It seems that we are really destined to be together. It's a waste of this heaven-sent opportunity if we don't get together. Yu Lily took a sip of milk tea, rolled her eyes at him and said, take your grandmother away. I'm going back. Enchanting stepped forward and glanced at the old lady who was still eating. She said, Grandma, do you know that my parents are worried sick about you in the capital? You are too capricious. Old Mrs. Shen ignored her. She looked at Yu Lily and said, this restaurant doesn't taste good. Next time, take me to one that tastes good. Enchanting was a little upset and looked at Yu Lily indignantly. Not only did this woman steal her man, but even her grandmother liked her a little more. Why? Grandma, it's time to go back. Let's go to my villa. It's the villa Ming gave me. It's big and comfortable. Let's live together, okay? Enchanting coaxed. However, old Mrs. Shen didn't buy it at all. She said, you can go back. I've already told Lily that I'll sleep with her today. You don't have to worry about me. Yu Lily almost choked on her milk tea. She turned to look at old Mrs. Shen and said, Grandma, you should go back with them. It's not convenient for me. The room is too small. It can't accommodate a great Buddha like you. But she didn't finish her sentence. Old Mrs. Shen looked at Yu Lily and asked with a hint of resentment, do you dislike me? Yes, yes. Chapter 1003. No matter how stupid old Mrs. Shen was, she knew that Yu Lily had acquiesced. Just a moment ago, he had a look of anticipation on his face, but now, he had collapsed. Such a change in expression was seen by everyone. Yu Lily felt a little guilty, but she still hardened her heart and looked away. Seeing this, Enchanting snorted and said, how cruel. Sure enough, a person who is willing to sell herself is also hard-hearted. Yu Lily looked up at her with cold eyes. Enchanting saw her expression and felt a little proud in her heart. She said, I heard that you broke up with Ming, but you have been Ming's mistress for so many years. Even if you don't have any credit, you have worked hard. You should also attend Ming's wedding. As she said this, she opened her bag and took out a stack of beautiful red booklets. There is no name on it. You can write it yourself and take it out directly. Mistress. Yi Qianqian and Yi Yuyu didn't know this. They looked at each other and saw surprise in each other's eyes. Other guests next to them heard it and also looked over curiously. Yu Lily's face darkened, and her eyes turned cold. She sneered and said, Miss Shen really has a big heart. You're preparing for your wedding, and at the same time, you're trying to get another man to play the taboo game. Isn't it cool to be two-timing? Hearing this, Shen Manting's hand trembled violently, and her face changed dramatically. She looked at Yu Lily incredulously. It was impossible. Shen Luo and only showed that side to her when no one was around, and Yu Lily was not familiar with her. How did she get the news from Shen Luofen? Shen Manting's breathing became rapid, and her hand holding the invitation suddenly tightened. However, she quickly pretended to be calm and sneered, What do you mean by this? You know very well what I mean. Yu Lily looked at her, stood up, and raised her eyebrows with a smile. I'll go back first. Take care of yourself. Yu Lily quickly walked out. Seeing this, Yi Qianqian quickly followed. Holding the blank invitation, Shen Manting's face quickly changed and became extremely ugly. Shen Jilie looked at Shen Manting and asked in a low voice, Is it true? You have another man. Shen Manting's breathing quickened and she shouted, Shut up. She stomped her foot and turned to leave. Yi Yuyu felt a little strange. Yu Lily's words kept echoing in her mind, taboo. Yi Qianqian knew that Yu Lily's ex-boyfriend was O Ming, but she didn't know that Yu Lily was a sugar baby. Subconsciously, Yi Qianqian thought of the plot in Yu Lily's manga. It seemed that the female protagonist was kept by the male protagonist, but in her heart, there was always a villain who resisted. Could it be that Yu Lily was painting her own story? However, when Yi Qianqian saw Yu Lily's expression, she didn't say anything. She quietly followed Yu Lily back home. However, as soon as she got out of the elevator, she saw a man standing in front of her house. A tall and handsome figure was standing at the door with a cigarette between his long fingers, which was emitting faint white smoke. When Yi Qianqian saw O Ming, she felt even more perplexed. She had just heard that Shen Manting was two-timing, but what was the difference between O Ming and Shen Manting now? Yi Qianqian felt that it was unfair for Yu Lily. When she saw O Ming, she didn't say anything. She took out her key and asked in a low voice, It can't be true, right? You have another man. Shen Manting breathed quickly and shouted, Shut up. Shen Manting stomped her foot and turned to leave. Yi Yuyu felt a little strange. Yu Lily's words kept echoing in her mind, taboo. Yi Qianqian knew that Yu Lily's ex-boyfriend was O Ming, but she didn't know that Yu Lily was a sugar baby. Subconsciously, Yi Qianqian thought of the plot in Yu Lily's manga. It seemed that the female protagonist was kept by the male protagonist, but in her heart, there was always a villain who resisted. Could it be that Yu Lily was painting my own story? However, when she saw Yu Lily's expression, Yi Qianqian didn't say anything. She silently followed Yu Lily back home. When she got out of the elevator, she saw a man standing in front of her house. The tall and handsome figure was standing at the door with a cigarette between his long fingers, which was emitting faint white smoke. When Yi Qianqian saw O Ming, she felt even more perplexed. She had just heard that Shen Manting was two-timing, but what was the difference between O Ming and Shen Manting now? Chapter 1004. The atmosphere was so quiet that it was a little strange. Yu Lily had not looked at him until now, as if he did not exist. Yi Qianqian was a little scared, and her hand that was opening the door was shaking. Finally, Yi Qianqian opened the door and breathed a sigh of relief. She immediately slipped in. But when Yu Lily was about to go in, O Ming suddenly took her hand behind her and said, let's talk. Yu Lily tried to pull her hand back, but she couldn't. She turned her head and looked at Oh Ming. Under Oh Ming's eyes, there was a layer of light blue compared to a few days ago, and he looked a little tired. On his clean and white face, there was a serious look. Yu Lily slightly raised her lips and smiled. There is nothing to talk about between us, Master O, you think too highly of me. There was a smile in her voice and words. There was not the slightest bit of unfriendliness in his tone. In fact, there was even a hint of flattery. However, in Oh Ming's ears, he felt that there was an indescribable sarcasm. It seemed that Yu Lily was mocking him, and he felt very uncomfortable. Oh Ming's eyes were deeper, and there was a trace of displeasure in his beautiful peach blossom eyes. He said, "Talk properly. Is there anything wrong with me talking like this?" Yu Lily's voice was a little sharp, and even Yi Qianqian felt that her tone was asking for a beating, let alone Oh Ming. Oh Ming's eyes were gloomy, and he held her hand tighter and said, "I miss you so much." Yi Qianqian was abused and silently hid aside. Yu Lily's heart was choked, and her eyes were slightly hot. She couldn't maintain the smile on her face, and she tried to pull her hand back, but Oh Ming didn't let go. Oh Ming stared at her. His peach blossom eyes, which used to be casual and elegant, were now deep. His dark brown pupils seemed to contain a lake, sparkling with delight. "Master O, it's not good for us to be like this." She looked at him with a distant and polite smile on her face. "You know, you are going to get married. Your fiancé just gave me an invitation, but I forgot to take it. But when you get married, it's better for me not to be there, right?" The smile on Yu Lily's face grew brighter and brighter. She looked at Oh Ming and said, "After all, I'm your former mistress. I'm not even your ex-girlfriend. What kind of identity should I attend the wedding? Even I didn't expect it." Oh Ming's heart ached. He held her hand tightly and said, "There won't be a wedding. Yu Lily, give me some more time. I will do what I said." He had said that he would marry her and make her his wife. But he couldn't do it, could he? The Shen family and the O family were well matched in social status, and Oh Ming's mother liked Shen Manting very much. What reason did he have not to marry her? Yu Lily had nothing, and now she was suffering from sexual apathy. She couldn't give him physical pleasure at all. At best, she could only give him psychological satisfaction. He had a mistress on his left and a wife on his right. What a good life. Yu Lily smiled and pulled her hand back. "No, Master O, I don't dare to expect those things you said. I only have one request for you now." Oh Ming narrowed his eyes and seemed to have guessed something. Chapter 1005. Entangled, Oh Ming's heart seemed to be squeezed tightly, and he couldn't help but feel pain. Yu Lily's smile widened and she said, "You're going to make me feel awkward. When other people ask me, 'Hey, Yu Lily, who is this to you?' I won't be able to answer them. Do you know that?" As she said that, Yu Lily's eyes became redder. She tried to smile and gently put her hand on his palm. "So, don't continue." Yu Lily pulled his hand away, and her smile was a little stiff. Oh Ming let go of her hand, but raised his hand to hold her shoulder. He clasped her head with his palm, bowed his head, and kissed her lips. Yu Lily was shocked by his unexpected action, and her heart suddenly jumped. Oh Ming's hand climbed up her waistline, and he gently sucked her lips, gently and lovingly. Such a kiss had nothing to do with lust. It was just a light kiss, and then he released her. "In the future, I won't let you be unable to answer." Oh Ming stroked her face with his big hand, and his voice was soft. Yu Lily pushed him away and turned her head. Then, she quickly entered the house and closed the door. Yi Qianqian saw Yu Lily come in and blinked. Yu Lily's eyes were red, and when she saw Yi Qianqian's look, she smiled. Are you in a cold war? Yi Qianqian looked at her and asked. Cold war. When a couple or a husband and wife ignored each other because of a quarrel, it was called a cold war. But she and O Ming, they were not a couple, nor a husband and wife, were they? When Yu Lily heard that, she sneered and said, there is no cold war. It's just a breakup. After that, Yu Lily walked into her room. Seeing that, Yi Qianqian sighed and said, ask the world, what is love? It makes people live and die for each other. For a period of time, O Ming didn't appear again. Yu Lily began to take on the work of the editor, and her performance was much worse than Yi Qianqian's. She was praised by editor-in-chief Zhou several times, and she even held a celebration party for her. After old Mrs. Shen stopped pestering her, Shenjilia's pursuit became more and more aggressive. In the past, he would only wait for her at the company after work, but recently, it had evolved into squatting at the entrance of the neighborhood. At 7:00 in the morning, Yu Lily would be followed by Shenjilia. Shenjilia smiled brightly and said, hello, you're running in the morning too. What a coincidence. Yu Lily just wanted to laugh, so she mercilessly exposed him. The neighborhood you live in is half an hour's drive from here. You run really fast. Awesome. Shenjilia didn't seem to realize that he had been ridiculed. He laughed out loud and even looked a little proud of himself. He said, well said, well said. Shall we have breakfast together later? No, I'm going to buy one for Qianqian. Okay, then I'll go to your house to eat. Shenjilia replied calmly, that's all. I'll take you to work afterward. It's on the way. What bullsh***. She rolled her eyes at him and quickened her pace. Shenjilia was tall and had long legs, so he easily caught up with her. He overtook her by half and said, by the way, has the illness you went to see improved? Sexual apathy. Chapter 1006. Are you concerned about me? Shenjilia raised his eyebrows proudly. He was not discouraged when Yu Lily rolled her eyes at him. That's our hospital. I can go if I want. I'll come back after a formality. You don't have to be so serious. Oh, really? That's great. Obviously, she didn't want to continue the conversation. Shenjilia quickly changed the topic and said, to be honest, your problem can't be ignored. If a woman has this problem, it must be treated. Yu Lily didn't answer. She panted and ran faster. Yu Lily stared at the front, but as she ran, her stomach became more and more painful. Frowning, Yu Lily slowed down a little. Shenjilia followed her very easily and said, I'm serious. Maybe it will cause menstruation. If it is more serious, it may cause problems with the uterus. It is obviously a psychological factor, but the body is closely related to the mood, so it can't be ignored. I happen to be free recently, so I'll treat it for you, shut up. Yu Lily roared. Her stomach hurt even more. She turned her head and shouted, you're so noisy. Shenjilia immediately shut up and looked at her figure in a very good mood. But he found that Yu Lily's footsteps were getting slower and slower. Shenjilia followed her. Seeing Yu Lily like this, he slightly raised his eyebrows and asked, what's wrong? Yu Lily frowned and shook her head. Her lower abdomen was cramping. She took a breath, but the original pain became more painful. Yu Lily couldn't help but squat down holding her stomach. Seeing her like this, Shenjilia also knew that the situation couldn't be underestimated. He reached out and touched her forehead. It was very cold, and there was a thin layer of cold sweat. Yu Lily's breathing became more and more rapid. Her body seemed to be pressed by a heavy weight. She reached out and grabbed his hand. Shenjilia was even more shocked and asked, "What's wrong?" Yu Lily's eyes became darker and darker, and her head became heavier and heavier. Yu Lily pushed him away, turned her head, and vomited. However, she only vomited a few mouthfuls of water and stomach acid. Shenjilia saw that, patted her on the back and said, "You can't do this. I'll take you to the hospital." Yu Lily didn't answer. She squatted on the ground and felt dizzy. It took a while for him to recover. Yu Lily grabbed Shenjilia's hand with both of her hands and helped him stand up. Her head was dizzy, and she was about to fall. Shenjilia picked her up in his arms and ran to the back. He placed her in his car and drove to a nearby hospital. The seats in the car were made of white leather. When he picked her up from the seat, Shenjilia noticed the red stain on the seat. Yu Lily squinted her eyes and looked half asleep. She looked very uncomfortable. Shenjilia finally understood that the woman was on her period. However, would there be such a big reaction during menstruation? All of the girlfriends he had had in the past were still full of energy during their periods. At most, they would pretend to be weak and weak. This was the first time Shenjilia had seen someone like this. Chapter 1007. Shenjilia was a little confused. He thought for a moment and turned to look at Yu Lily. Yu Lily was lying on the bed, weak, and her eyes were blacking out. Hearing this, she said, "Yes. I had a miscarriage." Abortion or medical abortion? Medical abortion, well, women should take care of their own bodies. Medical abortion is the most harmful to the body. You haven't recovered yet. How many times has it been like today? Yu Lily looked at the ceiling dizzily and said, "I don't know how many times, but occasionally, it's better than this situation." The doctor gave Yu Lily some medicine and said, "Have you seen a doctor? This kind of situation should be taken seriously. You can't underestimate it. Maybe you can't get pregnant. You need to find a Chinese medicine practitioner to take good care of it." Then she looked at Shenjilia with some blame and said, "A man should look after a woman and take care of her. How can she not recover?" After the infusion, Yu Lily's head was buzzing. When she heard the doctor's words, she had no strength and spirit. She slowly closed her eyes and fell asleep unconsciously. When she woke up, Shenjilia was at the bedside. Seeing Yu Lily wake up, he seemed a little surprised and said, "You're awake. I just made brown sugar water. Drink some." Yu Lily blinked and looked at Shenjilia, feeling a little confused. Then she remembered something and was shocked, shouting, "What time is it now? It's after 10 o'clock." Shenjilia looked at his watch, but when he saw Yu Lily's horrified look, he laughed and said, "Don't worry, Yi Qianqian has already asked for leave for you and explained the situation. What do you want to eat? I'll buy it for you." Yu Lily breathed a sigh of relief, but her lower abdomen still hurt. Hearing Shenjilia's words, she shook her head. Just then, there was only a little medicine left. The nurse then pulled out the needle, and Shenjilia helped Yu Lily up. Yu Lily had been lying for more than 2 hours and felt much better, but she still had no strength, and her lower abdomen hurt. Today, she was wearing a light blue sports suit, and there was a red mark on the back of her body. Shenjilia saw it, took off his coat, and wrapped it around her waist, saying, "I'll take you back. Can you walk?" "Sure. Thank you." Yu Lily put her hand on his and said, "I'll walk slowly." Shenjilia didn't force her. He helped her out of the hospital. However, just as he walked out of the hospital, he saw a Bentley driving over. Yu Lily accidentally glanced at the license plate number and was stunned. She looked up and saw Oh Ming getting out of the car. At that moment, Shangelia's arms were circling around Eulily's. He held her hands with both of his hands as if he was protecting a treasure. Eulily also had a men's sports coat tied around her waist. Oh Ming's face darkened. He quickly walked up to her and reached out his hand to grab Eulily without saying a word. However, Shangelia was quick to react. He quickly held Eulily in his arms and looked at him with a warning look. What do you want to do? Eulily was held tightly in Shangelia's arms. She was caught off guard and looked up at Shangelia. Shangelia's face was unspeakably serious. Vaguely, he looked at Oh Ming with a hint of warning and hostility. Chapter 1008. Hearing that, Shangelia laughed. His laughter was clear, with obvious unhappiness. Eulily could clearly feel the vibration of his vocal cords. She wanted to push him away, but her whole body was tightly held, and it was difficult to raise her strength. I say, brother-in-law, are you mistaken? Shouldn't your woman be my sister, Enchanting? Now Eulily is my girlfriend. Are you trying to steal my future brother-in-law's woman? Shangelia's voice was full of laughter. He raised his eyebrows and looked at him with sarcasm and disdain. When Eulily heard that, her eyes widened. She looked up at him and shouted, Shangelia, shoo, don't talk. Shangelia lowered his head and looked at her with endless tenderness in his eyes. Anyway, you have broken up. It's better to make some things clear. Every time he comes to pester you, you feel very annoyed, don't you? Yes, however, at the same time, there was a strange feeling. She loved him, but she minded that he was not hers alone. She wanted to see him, but she couldn't accept that he was engaged to another woman at the same time. The inexplicable relationship between them was the most confusing. When Oh Ming heard Shangelia's words, he was so angry that he laughed. He looked at Eulily and said in a cold voice, I heard that you asked for sick leave. What's wrong with you? Her face was pale, and she snuggled in Shangelia's arms like an ordinary little woman, like a little bird. She was completely different from when she was facing him. It has nothing to do with you, brother-in-law. Shangelia hugged her, and the smile on his face was sinister. Why do you care so much? My sister is the one who is planning the wedding. If you have the time to care about other women, you might as well take care of your own business. Don't end up in a mess. While speaking, Shangelia walked forward with Eulily in his arms and said, I'm also doing it for your own good, brother-in-law. Oh Ming stretched out his arms and put them in front of him, but his eyes fell on Eulily. His pair of peach blossom eyes were full of doubt and disbelief. He asked, Is it true? Eulily leaned against Shangelia's arms, and her face was pale. Hearing Oh Ming's obviously uncertain words, her heart was beating fast. Really? What would happen to him if what she said was true? If what she said wasn't true, then there was no doubt that Oh Ming would go back and forth and worry about both sides. As for her, she was still Oh Ming's woman, a pitiful mistress whom everyone looked down upon. Eulily looked at him and hugged him tightly. She buried her face in his chest and whispered, Let's go. I feel terrible. There was no direct answer. He did not say it was true, nor did he say it was false. But in Oh Ming's eyes, such an attitude was tantamount to a tacit agreement. Shangelia's big eyes were shining. He raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at Oh Ming in front of him. He said, Sorry, brother-in-law, you are in the way. He tried to push Oh Ming's hand away, but Oh Ming twisted it and grabbed Shangelia's hand. He looked at Eulily in anger and sneered, I haven't seen you for 2 days, and you can't wait to throw yourself into the arms of another man. Eulily, are you so lonely? His ruthless and sharp words were like thousands of sharp blades stabbing into Eulily's heart, ruthless and decisive. Chapter 1009. He was really angry, but what did it have to do with her? When Yu Lily heard Oh Ming's words, she laughed and said, "Mr. Oh, did you make a mistake?" Oh Ming was even angrier when he heard that. He looked at her and said nothing. "We broke up a long time ago, didn't we?" Yu Lily looked at him expressionlessly, and her body felt weak. Even if she wanted to make a disdainful expression, she felt too weak to do so. "Now, the person who pesters me is you, and the person who wants to marry me is you. In the past, it was you who ended the relationship first. Why do you have the final say? I will also be tired, Oh Ming." As she said that, she closed her eyes and leaned on Shinjilia's chest. "I didn't agree." Oh Ming looked at her. She was obviously uncomfortable, and her face was pale. Oh Ming felt sad. "I didn't agree, Yu Lily. The reason why I let you go is that I want you to calm down. I didn't want you to break up with me." "Ha. You think too highly of yourself." Yu Lily smiled gently. She was indescribably weak, but the words she said were like cold and sharp, stabbing into Oh Ming's heart. "Yu Lily." Oh Ming was furious, but when he saw her like this, he forcibly suppressed his anger and reached out his hand. "Give her to me." But how could Shinjilia be obedient? Holding Yu Lily, Shinjilia clearly noticed that Yu Lily was about to lose her strength again. His face darkened and he shouted, "Go away. Don't you see that she is uncomfortable? You made her so uncomfortable for 4 years, and now you don't let her go back to rest. How dare you say you love her? Oh Ming, you are so shameless." Shinjilia carried Yu Lily in his arms and strode in the direction of his car. Oh Ming was left standing in the same place, and his head was buzzing. So uncomfortable for 4 years. What does that mean? He carefully put her in the back seat of the car and let her lie down. After Shinjilia put her down, he went to the driver's seat and started the car. In front, Oh Ming came over and stood beside the car, his eyes staring at Yu Lily in the back seat. Shinjilia sneered, looked away, and whispered, "You are so shameless." Yu Lily heard it clearly in the back. She squinted her eyes and leaned against the car. When they got home, Shinjilia took out the keys from her pocket and keyed in the password before gently placing her on the bed. After boiling some water, Shinjilia rummaged through the entire kitchen and finally found some brown sugar. He made some brown sugar water for her and blew on it to cool it down before helping her drink it. Yu Lily knew that the man was Shinjilia, and she felt guilty. He opened his eyes and said, "You go back first, I can do it alone." "No, I haven't eaten yet. We agreed to eat together." Shinjilia glanced at his watch. It was already past 11 o'clock. He clicked his tongue and said, "But I'm afraid breakfast is out of the question. What do you want to eat for lunch? What are you doing?" Shinjilia's face reddened. He coughed lightly and said, "I'll go buy it. I don't know how to cook." Yu Lily smiled and shook her head. "I can't eat. Then I'll just buy something. When I ring the doorbell later, you can open the door for me." "All right." Shinjilia was secretly happy to hear her answer. Normally, no matter how much he shouted or knocked on the door, the two women wouldn't open it. Chapter 1010. Sure enough, it's right to get up early every day. Shinjilia stood up with a smile and went downstairs to buy some food. Yu Lily took the opportunity to change into her pajamas. She threw the clothes in the laundry basket in the bathroom and went back to her room to sleep. When she heard the doorbell ring, she didn't know what time it was. However, when she opened the door, she didn't see Shinjilia. It was Oh Ming. Seeing her pale face, Oh Ming's heart didn't feel good, so he walked in. Lily wanted to push him away, but she didn't have much strength left in her. He gently held her hand and walked in openly. Lily was furious and shouted, "Oh Ming, what are you doing here?" Her voice was not loud, and it even sounded a little weak. Oh Ming pulled her to sit on the sofa and put down the things in his hand. Lily looked at them and saw that they were all supplements for blood and uterus. Oh Ming looked at her and said, "I'm looking at you." Lily's body was much better than before. She didn't feel so uncomfortable, but she was not as strong as usual. Now she just wanted to sleep, so she said impatiently, "Now that you've seen me, can we go?" Oh Ming looked at her face and felt a little distressed. He said, "I just went to ask the doctor." Ding dong. The doorbell rang. It must be Shanjilia coming back. Lily quietly breathed a sigh of relief, stood up, and went to open the door. But Oh Ming grabbed her hand and said, "Is it that guy?" "It's none of your business, Oh Ming. You're too nosy." The same words from Lily's mouth were more hurtful than from Shanjilia's mouth. Oh Ming's eyes darkened. He looked at Lily and said, "What he just said at the hospital gate, is it true?" Lily tilted her head and looked at him with a sneer. Oh Ming's eyes narrowed, and he took a step forward and put his hands around her waist. Lily's body suddenly tightened, and she looked at Oh Ming with surprise. Ding dong. Ding dong. Ding dong. The doorbell rang one after another. Lily looked at the door and knew that it must be Shanjilia standing outside. However, her body was surrounded by Oh Ming, and Lily couldn't walk over at all. Oh Ming looked at her. His beautiful peach blossom eyes were deep, like the deep blue sea in the night sky. He said slowly, "Do you know that you have a habit?" Every time he questioned her, if she didn't want to tell the truth, she would muddle through. At first, Oh Ming was deceived. Towards the end, Oh Ming had basically figured out her routine. When he questioned her just now, she did not answer him directly. Yes or no. In other words, it was very likely to be fake. It was all a lie made up by Shanjilia. When Lily heard his words, she took a step back and reached out to push him away. "I'm used to it. It's none of your business. Let go of me. Answer me directly. Is that guy really your boyfriend? Yes or no?" Oh Ming looked at her, his eyes as deep as the sea. Ding dong. Ding dong. The doorbell continued to ring. Lily looked at him, looked at his hand, and said indifferently, "My boyfriend is outside. It's not good for you to do this. Yes or no?" Oh Ming was very persistent. He looked at her, and his hand tightened. Chapter 10-11. "I don't believe it," Oh Ming said coldly. He looked at her slightly evasive eyes and sneered. "You really can't lie. Do you think I will believe it just because you say it casually? Deceiving yourself." Lily was a little annoyed and struggled with her hands. "He's much better than you. At least he wouldn't force me to do something I don't want to do when I'm in such pain. He's not like you, self-righteous and deceiving yourself like a fool." Lily was a little annoyed. Oh Ming's heart was choked, and his hand holding her was unconsciously tightened. Lily wailed and shouted, "It hurts so much. My waist and stomach." Oh Ming was shocked and immediately released his hand. Lily bent down with a painful look on her face, holding her stomach. "Does it hurt?" "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it." At the same time, the door was opened. Shanjilia came in with the key in his hand. When he saw Oh Ming, his face sank. He quickly walked over to Lily's side and placed the things that he had bought with great difficulty on the coffee table. He helped Lily up and gently said, "How are you feeling?" Take a break first. I'll help you in. Oh Ming gritted his teeth and went forward to push Shanjilia away. Shanjilia was caught off guard and was pushed to the side. They looked at each other and saw anger in each other's eyes. What are you doing here? You are not welcome here. Shanjilia looked at him and said word by word. He helped you Lily up and whispered, does it hurt? Is it that guy's fault again? That guy, is he talking about me? Oh Ming laughed and looked at Shanjilia. His eyes were like a storm raging. When he was about to speak, he heard Yu Lily said, yes, it's this guy's fault. Yu Lily bent down and did not look up. Her voice was indescribably weak. Shanjilia was distressed. He held her and said, I will take you in to rest. I didn't mean it. Oh Ming looked at Yu Lily and felt a little guilty. I'm sorry, Yu Lily, I believe you didn't mean it, but... Yu Lily seemed to chuckle, looked up at him, and said slowly, the damage has been done, hasn't it? Oh Ming's heart was shocked. The hurt in Yu Lily's eyes in front of him was so strange that it was not like her. You didn't do it on purpose, but have you ever thought about my feelings? Yu Lily looked at him, and her eyes became redder. You only know what you want and what you don't want. Have you ever thought about what I want and what I don't want? Yu Lily looked at him with tears in her eyes. No. You haven't thought about any of them. You're high and mighty, you're insufferably arrogant, you were born with a golden spoon in your mouth. You're the only son of the O clan. You've had everything you wanted since you were a child. In fact, you've been able to turn over the clouds and reign in the O clan. You've been living like a crown prince since you were a child. But, so what? She was an orphan who had nothing. Since she was young, she knew that she had to carefully pretend to be obedient. Only in this way could she get candy and make the adults like her. But Oh Ming didn't need to. He just needed to curl his index finger and he could get anything. They didn't belong to the same world, so how could they be together? The gap between them couldn't be made up by a few years of being a mistress and a few years of famous brands. I don't care. Do you think I'm with you just for money? You regard me as your mistress, a moving inflatable doll. That's all. Do you think your pestering is true love? Yu Lily laughed and looked at him sarcastically. This is called being cheap, Mr. O. Oh Ming smiled and looked at her sarcastically. Chapter 10-12. This is called being cheap. Her sharp words pierced Oh Ming's heart. Oh Ming looked at her with a complicated expression. His heart couldn't help but feel a little sour and a little painful. I didn't. Oh Ming gritted his teeth and roared. You Lily, don't I know how I treat you? Of course I know. Yu Lily looked at him and smiled slightly. But do you really know how you treat me? He had always thought that he was good to her. Indeed, very good. But it was not what Yu Lily wanted. What do you mean? You know it in your heart. Yu Lily smiled and closed her eyes tiredly. I don't want to play this boring game with you anymore. Go, Oh Ming. I don't want to be with you. I really don't want to. Yu Lily leaned on Shanjilia and slightly tilted her head, buried it in his chest, and said, please leave, and don't come back in the future. Yu Lily was exhausted by the time she finished yelling. Shanjilia hugged her tightly, looked at Oh Ming with a cold face, and shouted, didn't you hear me? Please leave. After that, Shanjilia carried Yu Lily into her room. He put Yu Lily down and looked down at her. He found that her face was already wet. Her pale face was glistening with tears. It was very beautiful, like a rose that was about to wither. Yu Lily was the toughest woman he had ever seen. She was not the most beautiful, but she was unique and fascinating. Shinjilia had had many girlfriends, but none of them made him feel so sorry. Oh Ming is a bastard. After settling her down and gently covering her with the quilt, Shinjilia sat on her bed and didn't go out again. Yu Lily closed her eyes for a long time and asked, "Is he gone?" "I don't know." Shinjilia didn't go out. He looked at Yu Lily and asked, "Are you still uncomfortable?" "Yes, I'm hungry." Shinjilia chuckled and said, "I'll bring the food in to eat." "Okay." Yu Lily still didn't open her eyes. Shinjilia got up and went out. He didn't know when Oh Ming had left, but there was a note on the table. On it, there were beautiful and bold words written by Oh Ming. "Wait for me." Shinjilia's heart sank when he heard those two words. This guy still hasn't given up. He tore up the note and tossed it into the trash can. He brought the takeout he had just bought in and pretended as if nothing had happened. He smiled and took out the food. It was past 7:00 in the evening when Shen Luo and received Oh Ming's message. Oh Ming's message was very simple: "Let's make a deal." Shen Luo and glanced at the message and replied, "I'm in Kingstown. See you tomorrow." He tossed his phone aside and looked at Yi Yuyu. Yi Yuyu was a little scared. Looking at Shen Luo and in front of her, her heart was beating fast. She shouted, "Brother Luo, are you afraid now?" Shen Luo and took a step forward and looked at the layout of the surroundings. "You're going to let Grandma live in a shabby place like this?" Don't you know that Grandma is in poor health?" Shen Luo and looked at her with a gloomy expression. Yi Yuyu didn't dare to look up. She lowered her face and mumbled, Don't you know that Grandma is not very smart? Brother Luo and Grandma asked me to bring her here. I also." Chapter 10:13. When Yi Yuyu heard this, she shrank her shoulders and did not dare to refute. Shen Luo and looked at Yi Yuyu with some disappointment and said, "Yuyu, I thought you would at least be a little more sensible after being a manager for so many years. I didn't expect you to be the same as before. Do you think you can please Grandma by doing this?" Yes, she couldn't. Moreover, such a Yi Yuyu would make people feel more annoyed and annoyed. Yi Yuyu was well aware of this, but she didn't realize it until old Mrs. Shen was taken back. "I'm afraid that she didn't want to come to Kingstown, and she really wanted to exclude me." After Yi Yuyu thought through everything, she felt more and more uncomfortable. The old lady was really unscrupulous in order to drive me away from the Shen family. Now even Shen Luo and, looking at Yi Yuyu's aggrieved look, Shen Luo and felt even more angry. He sneered and said, "Who are you showing this to now? Do you think I dare not scold you when I see you like this?" "No, Brother Luo, and this time it's my fault." Yi Yuyu lowered her head and looked at the ground. "There won't be a next time." Seeing Yi Yuyu's look, Shen Luo and shook his head gently and said, "Forget it." As he spoke, he picked up the coat on the sofa and then walked out of the door. Yi Yuyu had expected that he would not stay in her house for the night, but she still felt a little disappointed when she saw this scene. She asked, "Where are you going? Do I need to report to you where I go?" Shen Luo and glanced at her with a faint smile. "We are husband and wife." "Yes, husband and wife." Shen Luo and chuckled, but he did not care about the identity of husband and wife at all. He put on his coat and walked outside. Shen Luo and opened the door, went out, and closed the door. This series of movements was smooth, without any hesitation or pause. Yi Yuyu was disappointed and sat on the sofa. He had always been like this. He was waiting for her to be unable to bear it and ask for a divorce. Perhaps it was just an obsession when she was young. From a very young age, Yi Yuyu told everyone that she would marry Brother Luo, and when she grew up. When they were young, Shenluo and would also respond with a smile and say, "Okay, then when you grow up, you will be my bride." Even when they were in school, Shenluo and didn't treat them like this. However, since when did everything change? Ding dong. The doorbell rang. Yi Qianqian walked toward the door while applying a facial mask. When he opened the door, he saw a big man. When Shenjilia saw Yi Qianqian, he smiled brightly and said, "Good afternoon on the weekend. Let's have afternoon tea together." Yi Qianqian touched the mask on her face and didn't say a word. She turned around and went back to browsing Weibo on the sofa. Ever since Yu Lily almost fainted during her morning run a few days ago, her relationship with Shenjilia had changed. In the past, Shenjilia had often come to look for Yu Lily, but he hadn't even been able to enter the door. However, it was completely different now. Not only did they visit frequently, but even the treatment they received was completely different. Chapter 10:14. Shenjilia brought the snacks in and put them on the table. He asked, "Where is Lily?" Drawing in the room, Yi Qianqian said with her eyes squinted. Shenjilia walked slowly to the door of Yu Lily's room and knocked on the door. Yu Lily thought it was Yi Qianqian, so she shouted without looking up, "Come in." However, it was another person who opened the door and came in. Yu Lily was a little surprised. When she saw him, she said, "Why are you here again? Didn't you say you had something to do?" "Well, I'm done." Shenjilia walked in and walked behind Yu Lily to watch her draw. But when she saw the male lead, an obscure expression flashed across her face. On the screen, the male lead was sitting on the sofa. His long legs and unusually long fingers were holding a cigar. He was wearing a burgundy suit, and the shape of his eyes was beautiful and long. When he squinted slightly, he looked indescribably lifelike and lifelike. Oh Ming. Shenjilia felt a little strange, but at the same time, he felt a little frustrated. Yu Lily's words were harsh, but she couldn't let go of Oh Ming. "Let's go out to eat. I bought some snacks and desserts. Let's have afternoon tea together." Shenjilia leaned closer and whispered in her ear. Yu Lily was very focused on drawing. After she answered casually, she didn't stop. After she finished the dialogue with the male lead, Yu Lily stopped. However, when she turned her head, she saw Shenjilia looking at her attentively from behind. Yu Lily was shocked, but then, when she met Shenjilia's burning eyes, she couldn't help but blush. She reached out and slapped his face, shouting, "Pervert, why are you so close to me?" Shenjilia was slapped, but he didn't look angry at all. He quietly smiled and said, "Let's go." Yu Lily was embarrassed. Shenjilia is really a master at picking up girls. Even Yu Lily was captivated. Yu Lily had to admit that she was impressed by his tricks. Seeing Shenjilia go out, Yu Lily relaxed a little. Recently, Shenjilia had been taking care of her meticulously. This was something she had never experienced when she was with Oh Ming. Oh Ming was too overbearing. Many times, he did everything without considering her feelings. Shenjilia was the exact opposite. No matter what he did, he would always consider Yu Lily's feelings, which made her feel very comfortable. At the same time, he felt extremely guilty. She did not have any feelings for him. Not having feelings can be cultivated. When you and Oh Ming first got together, didn't you also have feelings? Just last night, when she told Yi Qianqian about it, Yi Qianqian had said, the best way to get out of a relationship is to start another one. You draw comics yourself. Surely you know this, don't you? Yi Qianqian. After taking 2 deep breaths, Yu Lily walked out. When he went out, Yi Qianqian was already eating. She held a cup of milk tea in her hand and a black forest cake in front of her. She was staring at her phone in shock. Lily's face was still warm. She picked up a cup of milk tea, put a straw in it, and watched it with Enchanting. She immediately turned off the movie on her cell phone and said, "Lily, go and buy groceries. It's already so late. The vegetables won't be fresh anymore." Old Shin, go with her. Shinjilia sat quietly on the side and looked a little bored. Yi Chanchan was keenly aware of that. She immediately turned off the movie on her cell phone and said, "Lily, go and buy groceries." Chapter 10-15. Of course, Lily knew what Yi Chanchan meant. Wasn't she trying to create an opportunity for them to be alone? Such an obvious intention. Lily wasn't stupid. However, it just so happened that Lily had something she wanted to clarify with Shinjilia. Without clarifying it, Lily would always feel suffocated. Taking advantage of the situation, Lily went into the room to take her bag and went to the nearby supermarket. Shinjilia could tell at a glance that he had never bought groceries before. He looked left and right. Suddenly, she exclaimed and shouted, "Lily, look, this radish looks so strange." Lily turned her head in the direction of the voice and saw that he was holding a radish in his hand. However, this white radish was two radishes joined together. There was an obvious dent in the middle, and in the middle of the two radishes, there was a small radish tail poking out. Shinjilia picked up the radish and smiled brightly. "Look at this. Doesn't it look like a family of three?" Seeing the bright smile on Shinjilia's face, Lily couldn't bring herself to smile. The corners of his lips twitched as he said, "Thank you for the past few days." When Shinjilia saw the change in Lily's expression, he knew that she had something to say. He smiled and looked at her hand that was holding the handle of the cart tightly. Then, his gaze fell on her slightly shrunken shoulders. "What are you talking about?" Shinjilia shrugged his shoulders and raised his eyebrows slightly. He didn't seem to notice Lily's strangeness. He put the white radish into the cart and said, "You don't have to be so polite. We are all friends." Friends, Lily felt a little embarrassed. It seemed that she did not treat him as a friend. Instead, it was a strange relationship, a strange state. Seeing her slightly embarrassed expression, Shinjilia chuckled and said, "I know what you want to say, but there are some things you'd better not say out loud." As he spoke, he leaned toward Lily, and his smile became more and more brilliant. Just when Lily thought he was going to say something, Shinjilia's smile suddenly disappeared and turned into a faint smile. He leaned over and tilted his head slightly. Lily's heart skipped a beat, and she instinctively wanted to avoid him. Shinjilia's hands moved even faster. He held her head in place and whispered, "Shoo, don't move." The distance between them was less than 3 centimeters, and they could feel each other's breath. Lily's body stiffened, and she felt a little nervous. Did this guy want to kiss her? However, Shinjilia didn't make any further moves. He said, "Look behind me. Is there someone I know there?" Lily looked in the direction he was pointing at and saw a tall figure among the women and elderly people who were buying groceries. He was wearing a dark suit with dark patterns. His body was tall and straight, and he was squinting at them. The distance was a little far, and Lily was a little short-sighted. She couldn't see his expression clearly, but she could clearly see who this figure was. The angle was right behind Shinjilia. Lily's silhouette was hidden by Shinjilia's tall figure. From the back, it was impossible to see her expression. From the back, it looked like they were kissing. Chapter 10-16. After Shinjilia said that, he pulled Lily up, put his hand on her trolley, and walked side by side with her. Oh Ming stood behind, watching them cuddle with each other, and his face became more and more gloomy. This is still in public. How dare the two of them be so presumptuous? Have they already? The more Ming thought about it, the more angry he became. Clenching his fists, Ming closed his eyes, turned around, and didn't stay. Seeing Ming turn away, Shenjilia slightly raised his lips, turned his head, and looked at Yu Lily. Yu Lily also looked in the direction of Ming's departure, and her eyes were slightly gloomy. I still can't let it go, how can this be? Yu Lily didn't notice the change in Shenjilia. She inadvertently turned her head and saw the green onions and garlic sprouts placed together. She couldn't help but think of the time when she went to the supermarket with Ming. Ming pushed the trolley and grabbed whatever he saw. Finally, he grabbed 2 bundles of vegetables and asked, which is the green onions and which is the garlic? At that time, she also frowned and asked with a distressed face, yes, which is the green onions and which is the garlic? Yu Lily didn't recognize them at all, so she bought both. After returning home, Yu Lily went to cook, and Ming excitedly jumped over with a tablet and shouted, Yu Lily, look, this round one is the green onions, and the flat one is the garlic. That smiling face was as bright as the stars yesterday, shining and dazzling, but now looking back, it was very far away. However, it was deeply imprinted in her mind, and it was difficult to erase. Shenjilia found that she was staring at the things in front of her, so he reached out, waved in front of her, and shouted, Lily? Yu Lily suddenly came back to her senses, turned to look at Shenjilia, and suddenly chuckled and asked, tell me, these 2 things, which is the green onions and which is the garlic? Shenjilia looked at them and said, the left one is the green onions, and the right one is the garlic. Well, that's right. But Yu Lily didn't know why, but she felt a little lost. With a smile, Yu Lily pushed the cart and looked ahead. She said in a soft voice, Shenjilia, you know my past. I've cheated a lot of people, and I've been someone's mistress. I've been with Ming for so many years. Why are you still so good to me? When Shenjilia heard that, his eyes darkened, and he chuckled. Lily, do you think I treat you well? Very good. Tisk, if that's the case, it proves that I've succeeded. Shenjilia looked at her with a smile and continued, if even you think that I'm good to you, doesn't that mean that I'm even better in the eyes of others? The better I treat you, the angrier Ming gets. This guy is so fickle. He's obviously engaged to my sister, but he's not honest. He should be pished to death. Yu Lily was stunned and blinked her eyes. When Shenjilia saw her expression, he raised his eyebrows proudly. Stealing the woman he likes is the best revenge for him. Don't you think so? Does that mean that Shenjilia is pursuing me just to get revenge on Ming? Don't feel pressured. I'm pursuing you mostly because of my sister. Only by diverting all his attention from you can he treat my sister well, right? Shenjilia's smile didn't change, and his words were very natural. Suddenly, he changed the topic and asked, I want to eat eggplant. Can you make it? Yes, eggplant was Yu Lily's specialty. Chapter 10:17. When they got home from grocery shopping, Shenjilia helped Yu Lily in the kitchen while she cooked. But the young master was still the young master. Washing vegetables almost flooded the kitchen, and helping to look after the fire almost burned his own clothes. In the end, he was still driven out by Yu Lily. His days passed by uneventfully. Since that day when he saw her in the supermarket, he never appeared again. Love Transaction had been online for 2 months, and the number of clicks had exceeded 100 million. Compared with 2 months ago, the website traffic had more than doubled. As an author and an internal employee, Yu Lily not only enjoyed the admiration of all her colleagues, but she was also invited to the office by Editor-in-Chief Zhou. Little Yu, you've been here for some time. In view of your excellent performance, the higher-ups have decided to give you some rewards. What do you want? Just say the word. Anything I want. Of course, it doesn't have to be too expensive. We have to leave a good impression on the higher-ups, right? Chief Editor Zhou liked this little girl more and more. Even though the income from comics was considerable, she still worked diligently in the company. Among her colleagues, her performance was second only to Yi Qianqian's. Such achievements were equally impressive. More importantly, Yu Lily was neither arrogant nor rash, and she was very popular in the company. Yu Lily heard Editor-in-Chief Zhou's words and said, "Well, I want to take an early vacation." "Ah. That's it?" "Yes, just like that." Editor-in-Chief Zhou was surprised. She thought that she would ask for an expensive digital screen or laptop. According to Yi Qianqian, Yu Lily didn't have a computer. However, when he thought about it, he felt that it made sense. With Yu Lily's current income, she could buy a computer whenever she wanted. Her request was very simple. Editor-in-Chief Zhou nodded and said, "It's almost New Year. When do you want to have a holiday?" "On the 22nd, I'm going to travel." The 23rd was Ming and Shen Manting's wedding. She didn't want to see them happy. Kingstown was so big and yet so small at the same time. The news of their marriage would definitely spread everywhere. At the very least, there would be one less pure land in the country. Hearing the word travel, Chief Editor Zhou's eyes lit up and she asked, "Where are you going to travel?" Yu Lily smiled. She thought for a moment and said, "Probably to Japan." Yu Lily asked Yi Qianqian not to tell Shen Jilia about it. On the night of the 21st of December, Yu Lily packed all her luggage. She looked at the empty room and lay on the bed in boredom. All the important things were packed away. Yu Lily closed her eyes and put the headphones in her ears, listening to the bustling noise coming from the other side. Shen Manting was discussing the details of the wedding, including the makeup, guests, and hotels. All of these had been prepared, and they were just discussing the optimization. This kind of thorough preparation, this kind of painstaking effort, was so blissful. "Manting, someone's looking for you." "Hey, they're here." "Who is it?" Even the reply was brimming with joy. Shen Manting must be feeling very happy right now. Yu Lily felt a little jealous. She closed her eyes, took off the headphones, and threw them aside. Dash. Chapter 10:18. Shen Luo and was in a good mood when he saw the change in her expression. He looked at her and approached her step by step. Shen Manting looked at him approaching, and her face became paler and paler. She pushed back and shouted, "Sister Zhang, come here." I called Sister Zhang away. She shouldn't be outside now. The smile on his face widened. "What are you afraid of? I won't do anything to you. Big brother, I'm getting married the day after tomorrow. What do you want? As the big brother, can't I come to see my sister who is about to get married?" Shen Luo and stopped in his tracks and looked at Shen Manting's pale face. His heart sank. "Am I that scary? Why do you have such a big reaction?" Shen Manting had been forced into a corner, and the cold wall was behind her. At that moment, the distance between Shen Manting and Shen Luoan was less than a meter. As Shen Luoan spoke, his expression was calm. He approached her with a hint of malice. He leaned over, his hands still in his trouser pockets. Suddenly, his lips curved into a smile. "Are you afraid that I'll do it again?" His words undoubtedly poked at Shen Manting's sore spot. One more time, she had been 20 years old when old Mrs. Shen had brought her home. Poor and pitiful. He had accidentally intruded into his forbidden area and was almost torn to pieces by his Tibetan Mastiff. He had saved her, but Shen Luo and noticed that Shen Manting's eyes were wandering. He chuckled and said, "You're actually thinking about it." As he spoke, he reached out and placed his hand on the side of her face. In a low voice, he said, "Do you want me to remind you of that night?" "No." Shen Manting suddenly panicked and pushed him away. "You promised me, Shen Luo, and I'm getting married soon. What else do you want? You were the one who chose me. I didn't even have the right to choose. Are you going to go back on your word now? He didn't give you the right to choose." Shen Luo and raised his eyebrows and chuckled. "Didn't I give you a choice? Li Xiqing, O Ming, and me. As for my two childhood friends, you don't like them, do you?" Li Xiqing's wife was pregnant. "You're my big brother, how could I possibly choose you?" That was why she had chosen O Ming. Coincidentally, she had pinched O Ming's weak spot. She must marry O Ming the day after tomorrow. Otherwise, her life would be ruined. At the same time, footsteps could be heard from outside. It was Sister Zhang. Shen Manting was delighted and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Shen Luo and clearly saw her expression and sensed that the footsteps behind him were getting closer and closer. He smiled and straightened up, saying, "As your big brother, I just came to see you. Seeing that you are so lively, I am also relieved. You must prepare well and be the most beautiful bride." With that, Shen Luo and really turned around and left. Sister Zhang walked in with a paper bag in her hand. She smiled and said, "Miss, you are so lucky. Young master is so good to you. He knows that you are so busy that you don't have time to eat, so he specially ordered your favorite dessert. Come, eat it while it's hot." Shen Manting stared blankly at the desserts that Sister Zhang had placed on the table. She asked, "Did he ask you to fetch something just now?" "Yeah." Sister Zhang put the dessert in front of her and said, "Come and try it." Shen Manting frowned and looked in the direction where he had left. She was getting more and more confused as to what he was thinking. This man was temperamental. Perhaps one day he would, hot little sweetheart, big CEO, don't come over. After one night of passion, they had disappeared for 5 years. When they met again, she didn't recognize him. Mr. Bo still forcefully adopted this little kitten that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. He doted on her, loved her, violated her, and did everything he could. Chapter 10:19. Sister Zhang saw her in a daze and urged, "Come on, eat something. When you are full, you can continue to work. In 2 days, you will be the most beautiful bride." Hearing Sister Zhang's words, Shen Manting smiled, picked up the spoon, and looked down. On the 22nd of December, Yu Lily had already started her holiday, but the plane ticket was booked for 4 a.m. on the 23rd. All day, Yu Lily had been painting in her room. However, she never expected that Su Qianxi would call her. Usually, Su Qianxi was very busy with work, taking care of the children, and having personal space with Li Xiqing, so Yu Lily usually did not talk to her. The two had not contacted each other for half a month. Seeing Su Qianxi's call, Yu Lily was a bit surprised. Holding a pen, she picked up the phone and quickly answered, "Hello. Lily, are you free tonight?" There was a child's voice on the other side of the phone. It sounded like they were chasing and playing. The little girl's voice was soft and sweet. Yu Lily's heart softened, and she nodded and said, "Yes, what's wrong? Let's have dinner together tonight. We haven't been together for a long time. I will take the children with me. They haven't seen you for a long time." "Tonight?" Yu Lily glanced at her digital screen and nodded. "Okay, where to?" "Let's go to the place we often go." "I don't know any other places, okay? The place we often go, it was Palace 1 under the O group. O Ming also often went there. Yu Lily was a bit hesitant. When she was about to discuss with Su Qianxi about changing places, there came the cry of the child, "Mom." When Yu Lily heard his voice, it was as if a soft spot in her heart had been touched, and it immediately sank. Su Qianxi responded and said, "Then it's settled. Let's have dinner together at 7 p.m. Bye." Before Yu Lily spoke, Su Qianxi had already hung up the phone. "Forget it, let's go. It shouldn't be so coincidental, right?" Yu Lily ignored it and continued to paint. When it was almost 5 p.m., Yu Lily began to change clothes and put on makeup. It took about half an hour to get to Palace 1 by taxi. When Yu Lily arrived, it was exactly 18:53 in the evening. Palace number 1 was a combination of entertainment, dining, leisure, and so on. It was located in a key location and had gorgeous decorations. 1, 2, 3, 10. He leaned against the wall and counted. When he counted to 10, he straightened up, looked around, and shouted, "I'm going to start looking." "Okay." Li Jianyue hid behind the curtains. Her small figure could be seen clearly. Seeing this scene, Li Xiqing could not help but laugh. However, he deliberately looked around and pretended to be distressed. "My little baby, where are you?" When she heard her father's words, Li Jianyue shrank back and the curtains were flattened. The little girl's sweet voice called out, "Daddy, you won't be able to find me. I'm hiding." Li Xiqing laughed out loud and said, "Is that so? Where are you hiding then? I won't tell you. You have to find me yourself." Li Jianyue shouted. Her voice was a little smug. "You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.